Nanette Krentel grew up in New Orleans in a humble, close-knit family. Her parents, Dan and Pat Watson, raised her along with her siblings Kim, Eliza, and 3 half-siblings, and taught her important values of loyalty and kindness, known for her gentle and caring nature. Nanette had a deep love for animals and shared her home with 2 cats and a dog. Despite moving away, she maintained a close bond with her family, especially her father and sisters, speaking with them daily. In 1994, at 27 years old, Nanette met Steve Krentel while applying for a job at his office supply store. Steve, then 28, owned both a scuba gear business and the store, and was going through a divorce at the time. Their professional relationship soon turned romantic, and after Steve finalized his divorce, he introduced Nanette to his young son, Justin. By 1995, they were married. Steve's native of Louisiana. He grew up near Lacombe and reportedly had a tense relationship with his brother, Brian. In 2000, Steve and Nanette moved to Lacombe, closer to his parents. He gradually worked his way up in the Tammany Parish Fire Department, eventually becoming the fire chief. Respected for his professionalism, his career in the fire department provided him with financial security and influence in the community. In 1997, after Steve sold both of his businesses, Nanette shifted her career path. She began working at a daycare center, where her kind and attentive nature earned the trust of parents and co-workers. Beyond her job, she became involved in the community, organizing fundraisers and charitable events, as well as supporting local fire departments by selling handmade ceramics and baked goods. By 2017, she had been out of the workforce for several years, focusing instead on her home, her pets, and continued community involvement. Although she had no children, Nanette was always concerned and attentive to the lives of her loved ones. She often played a central role in family matters, offering emotional and financial support to her loved ones. To outsiders, she and Steve seemed to lead a peaceful life, residing on 100 acres of scenic remote property in Lacombe. However, behind closed doors, Nanette grew increasingly concerned for her safety after Steve's brother, Brian, was released from prison. Brian allegedly blamed Nanette for the legal issues that led to his incarceration and had made direct threats against her. In response, she urged for additional security measures, having cameras installed around the property and keeping protective tools in her bedroom, car, and purse. She openly shared her fears with her family. Her father and sisters, aware of the escalating tension, were alarmed but did not anticipate just how grave the situation would become. Steve was also concerned and worked with Nanette to increase security. He installed additional cameras, purchased self-defense equipment, and even practiced shooting with her at a local shooting range. However, despite these precautions, the simmering problems in their family did not go away. Behind the facade of a peaceful life, there were bitter family conflicts, growing tensions, and the choices ahead led to unforeseen consequences. On July 14, 2017, at around 2:30 p.m., the St. Tammany Parish Fire Department received an urgent call from Steve's cousin, who lived nearby. He reported seeing thick smoke rising from Steve's property and suspected the house was on fire. Despite the distance between their homes and the dense forest in between, the fire was visible from afar. Steve and his team arrived at the scene around 3 p.m. when the house was engulfed in flames. Firefighters worked into the evening to extinguish the fire, only to discover human remains in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The damage was extensive, but the location of the remains and the fact that no one else lived there indicated the victim was likely Nanette, Steve's wife. No alarms had sounded, and throughout the day, Steve's repeated calls to both Nanette's cell phone and the house landline had gone unanswered. Her car remained in the garage, further confirming she had been home at the time of the fire. Tragically, all the household pets also perished, reflecting the sudden and intense nature of the flames. Federal fire investigation specialists joined the inquiry. Initially, the fire was considered a possible accident, but the circumstances surrounding Nanette's death raised suspicions. Her remains were found in the bathroom, and there was no indication she had tried to escape. This prompted a forensic autopsy, which included DNA testing and an investigation into the cause of death. About a week later, during a memorial service, part of the coroner's preliminary findings became public. It was revealed that Nanette had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, with a bullet found in her skull. This discovery completely shifted the direction of the investigation. On July 18th, the sheriff confirmed the findings, apologized for the delay in communication, and acknowledged evidence of a criminal act. Further autopsy results showed no smoke inhalation in Nanette's lungs, proving that she had died before the fire. Since no weapon was found near her body, the possibility of self-inflicted injuries has been ruled out. The investigation further revealed the presence of 9 security cameras on the property, but Steve stated that the system had stopped functioning several days before the fire. Efforts to recover footage from the damaged equipment were unsuccessful. This lack of evidence, combined with forensic findings, suggested the fire had been intentionally set to destroy evidence. Investigators shifted their focus to individuals who might have had both motive and access to the property. However, an official statement confirming foul play in Nanette's death was not released until 4 days after the fire. The family's frustration with the investigation grew, particularly because the coroner had noted the gunshot wound the day after the incident, yet this information wasn't immediately shared with them. Nanette's sister, Kim, a prosecutor in Nebraska, publicly criticized the investigation, pointing to the lack of proper scene containment, which may have compromised evidence. When Nanette's relatives arrived in Louisiana shortly after the tragedy, they found the property unsecured and the house open. Within 2 days, Steve was allowed to return to the site, raising concerns about evidence being altered or lost. It wasn't until Steve's son, Justin, discovered a fragment of a human skull in the debris that authorities finally secured the scene. The incident has left the public losing confidence in Sheriff Randy Smith's department. While federal investigators conduct an independent analysis, they discovered multiple points of ignition and traces of accelerants, confirming the fire was deliberately set. Despite these findings, however, the sheriff did not rule out the possibility that Julie harmed herself, citing the lack of a recovered weapon and inconclusive ballistics test results. Later, 2 firearms were found in the remains of the home, but neither could be definitively linked to the fatal shot. The bullet recovered from Nanette's skull was too damaged for reliable analysis. Additional forensic tests reinforced previous findings, including finding no smoke in Nanette's lungs and no food in her stomach. Despite her having been seen purchasing food at a fast food restaurant that morning, additional inconsistencies came to light during the investigation. There was no blood on Nanette's gunshot wound to the head, as is often the case, leading to speculation that her body may have been moved after her death. An independent expert suggested that whoever moved her was likely familiar with the layout of the house. The sheriff, however, publicly disputed the forensic expert's conclusions. This discrepancy with the findings of federal agents further undermined public confidence in the investigation. Nanette's family began openly questioning the integrity of local authorities and raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest. As discrepancies mounted, the sheriff was eventually compelled to issue a public statement, acknowledging that Nanette's death resulted from a violent act. Despite this admission, the investigation failed to identify the person responsible. The case shifted towards exploring possible motives and suspects with access to the property. Nanette's husband, Steve, was naturally a key subject of interest due to his unrestricted access to the house. He willingly cooperated, volunteered for a polygraph test, and passed. However, since polygraph results are not entirely reliable, investigators didn't eliminate him as a suspect. Steve's alibi was backed by fire department security footage confirming he was at work on the day of the incident, starting at 8 a.m., and didn't leave at any point, including during lunch. This was corroborated by surveillance footage and his co-workers' testimonies. However, it was noted that Steve working on a Friday was unusual, as he usually took that day off. Investigators also analyzed Nanette's movements on the morning of July 14th. Traffic cameras spotted her driving between her home and a nearby fast food restaurant, where her bank card was used to buy food. Her car was later seen near her house. About an hour later, a phone call was made from Nanette's phone to an unfamiliar number. The person on the other end claimed not to know her, and the reason for the call remains unexplained. Investigators explored potential personal conflicts and discovered that Steve had been in an extramarital relationship with a colleague. Nanette was aware of the affair and had told others she was considering divorce, which under state law would involve dividing their shared assets, an arrangement that could have been financially disadvantageous for Steve. When questioned, Steve admitted to the affair but claimed the couple had reconciled and planned to stay together. Close family members were also questioned. Steve's son, Justin, had reportedly experienced tension with his stepmother, Julie. In the past, family acquaintances described him as having unusual interests, including a fascination with firearms. However, Justin provided documentation proving he was out of state for work on the day of the incident, which was verified, ruling him out as a suspect. Investigators also looked into Steve's brother, Brian, who had a criminal record and a history of family conflicts. Over the years, Nanette had voiced concerns about his behavior. Shortly after his release from prison, she sent her sister a message describing a specific threat from him, in which he allegedly displayed aggressiveness and hinted at setting the house on fire. These claims were corroborated through their text exchanges. Surveillance footage from their parents' home showed Brian did not leave the premises on the day of Nanette's death. However, a wearable tracking device issued to him malfunctioned and failed to record any location data that day, with the cause of this failure unexplained. Another puzzling incident occurred a month before Nanette's death. A security camera recorded an unidentified man near the entrance gate of the property. He left behind a cigarette butt and a knife. Nanette informed her father about the incident, but the man's identity remained unclear and no investigation was conducted to find out more. After investigating multiple leads, the case remained unsolved. Every suspect either had a confirmed alibi or there wasn't enough evidence to make a formal accusation, leaving the investigation at a dead end. 2 months after Nanette's death, the sheriff made another public announcement. He declared that Steve was no longer a person of interest in the case, explaining that Steve's alibi had been verified. There was no clear motive, and the evidence was deemed insufficient to move forward. However, Nanette's family felt this announcement was premature, as not all digital records had been reviewed. Several witnesses had yet to be re-interviewed, and a detailed timeline of her phone activity leading up to her death was still incomplete. It appeared the investigation was entering a state of stagnation. When Nanette's family requested access to the case documents, their attempts were met with vague responses. Louisiana state law restricts access to investigative materials to the closest next of kin, which in this case was Steve, not Nanette's parents or sisters. Steve did not share these documents with the rest of the family. In search of answers, Nanette's relatives turned to private attorneys and independent forensic experts. One expert, after examining the available evidence, identified signs of deliberate investigative mismanagement, noting that critical protocols for handling cases involving violent deaths and burnt evidence had been disregarded. The conclusions and methodologies of the private experts sharply contrasted with those of the local authorities. Efforts to transfer the case to a different jurisdiction proved unsuccessful. Appeals to the district attorney's office were dismissed, with officials citing a lack of legal justification to relocate the investigation. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Nanette's family turned to social media, launching a page to provide updates and highlight inconsistencies in the investigation, in the hope of pressuring authorities into action. However, the sheriff's actions became a significant obstacle to achieving transparency. His public statements, dismissal of expert findings, and personal connections to individuals potentially linked to the case raised concerns about his impartiality and deepened public mistrust. Despite multiple individuals with potential motives, the investigation failed to reach a definite conclusion. Detectives worked on verifying alibis, analyzing technical records, and identifying gaps in the official narrative. But these efforts often revealed inconsistencies that undermined the credibility of the evidence. A key issue was the absence of location data from the Jeep's-enabled ankle monitor worn by Brian. On July 14th, the day of the incident, the monitor registered no location data, an unexplained blackout. Authorities were unable to determine whether the failure was a technical error or whether the monitor had been intentionally disabled. This missing data represented a major accountability failure and raised serious questions. Another troubling discovery came from a review of footage from a security camera inside Brian's parents' home. The video depicted Brian with a working desk lamp and a visible wall clock in the background, ostensibly providing an alibi. However, Nanette's family questioned the authenticity of this footage, suggesting it could have been pre-recorded or staged. Experts also observed that the angle and focus of the camera appeared unusual for a standard household surveillance setup. Additional uncertainty arose with surveillance footage from a fast food establishment showing Nanette's vehicle. Investigators assumed she was driving the car that morning, but the video quality was too poor to verify her identity. This assumption was based solely on her bank card being used to make a purchase nearby. The situation was further complicated by the fact that there was no footage from her home surveillance system on the day of the incident. Steve claimed the cameras had not been operational at the time, but investigators later found traces of accelerant on the damaged equipment. Experts concluded that the security system had likely been intentionally tampered with before the fire, suggesting someone with knowledge of the camera's locations and purpose had interfered. After Nanette's father passed away, her sisters took the lead in demanding a proper investigation. They launched an online awareness campaign, collaborated with advocacy groups, and participated in discussions on crime-focused platforms. The family repeatedly urged state authorities to transfer the case to an independent investigative body, but their requests were consistently met with generic responses that lacked meaningful action. They were also frustrated by the investigators' failure to review footage from the citywide surveillance system, which could have offered critical context. These shortcomings formed the basis of formal complaints to the district attorney's office. Although officials promised to keep the case open, there was no evidence of real progress, receiving minimal support from local law enforcement. Nanette's family shifted their focus to building a network of allies. They connected with organizations specializing in unresolved cases, which led to increased attention on Nanette's death through podcasts, videos, and media coverage. By 2024, the case remained unsolved. However, new hope appeared when Colin Sims was elected district attorney. Colin publicly expressed his willingness to review the evidence, marking the first sign of possible investigative progress after nearly 7 years of inaction. As of March 2024, Nanette's case was still open, with no charges filed against any suspects. Despite coroner findings, witness testimonies, and independent assessments, authorities in St. Tammany Parish had yet to identify any responsible parties. What initially seemed like a straightforward case had instead devolved into a prolonged stalemate. By mid-2025, the case records were still sealed, and only individuals with legal standing, such as Nanette's husband, Steve, were granted access. The family remained barred from reviewing complete investigative reports, transcripts, or relevant surveillance data. Repeated appeals to state authorities went unanswered. In response, a grassroots group formed by Nanette's friends and family continued to provide social media updates, urging the public to come forward with any useful information. The family also sought assistance from federal agencies like the Department of Justice. In their letters, they raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest involving local authorities and petitioned for the case to be transferred to a higher jurisdiction. Independent experts consulted by the family identified numerous investigative avenues that had not been fully explored, including recovering deleted digital records and re-interviewing key witnesses. However, without official investigative authority, these proposals could not be enforced. Despite years of stagnation, Nanette's family has never stopped fighting for answers. For them, this is about more than personal grief. It is a pursuit of justice. The lack of progress has only strengthened their resolve. They firmly believe the truth can still be uncovered if independent expertise is brought in and the case is reviewed impartially. As of this report, the case remains open but inactive. Nanette Krentel's story highlights how errors, delays, and possible bias can obstruct justice in a major case. Yet, it also demonstrates the unwavering resilience of a family determined to keep her memory alive. Their goal remains unchanged: to uncover the truth, no matter how much time has passed or how many obstacles stand in their way.
Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Daniel LaPlante. In 1986, Frank Bowen, with his two daughters, Tina Bowen and Karen Bowen, experienced a series of terrifying events at their home in Townsend, Massachusetts. The girls initially believed that the house was haunted when strange phenomena began to occur, such as furniture being shuffled, strange noises coming from the walls, and threatening words written on mirrors and walls in a red material that looked like blood. These events left the family in extreme fear. Frank Bowen initially thought that his daughters were imagining things or playing a prank, but all doubts disappeared when he was faced with the terrifying truth. The person behind these bizarre events was Daniel LaPlante, a 16-year-old boy who lived nearby. In addition to trying to scare the Bowen family, Daniel secretly lived in their house for about 2 months. Taking refuge in the walls and narrow spaces between rooms, Daniel used secret passageways in the house to spy on and manipulate the family. The truth was discovered when Mr. Frank found Daniel in the house. Confronting him with a weapon in his hand, police later determined that Daniel had cut holes in the walls to move around undetected, turning the Frank home into a hiding place. Daniel LaPlante, often referred to as Danny, was born on May 15, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. He grew up with his parents and 2 brothers. But his childhood was far from happy. Daniel endured various forms of abuse from his father, including physical, emotional, and abuse. After cutting ties with his father, Daniel began living with another man, who also treated him cruelly. Their home was an unhealthy environment, filthy and cluttered with garbage, with a yard full of trash and stray animals roaming freely. This atmosphere contributed to Daniel's growing disillusionment with life. He became rebellious, and his teachers frequently complained about his behavior. What began as troubling behavior eventually escalated into self-destructive tendencies. Daniel struggled socially, performed poorly in school, and was described by his classmates as strange, unhygienic, and unpleasant. Most avoided him because of his appearance and behavior, concerned by his actions. The school referred Daniel to a psychiatrist for help during their sessions. It was discovered that Daniel had dyslexia and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. While the psychiatrist initially appeared to want to help, he instead exploited Daniel's vulnerabilities. Over the course of a year, the psychiatrist coerced Daniel into an abuse relationship, further compounding the trauma he had already endured throughout his life. By 1986, as a teenager, desperate to escape his life of torment, Abuse began committing petty thefts in his neighbors' homes. Initially, he focused on stealing specific items, but over time, he shifted his focus to instilling fear in the residents. He started leaving cryptic, unsettling messages, rearranging household items to confuse the homeowners, and scattering crumbs and food stains throughout the houses. One of the homes he targeted belonged to the Bowen family. The Bowen family lived in Townsend, Massachusetts. In the same county as Daniel, the household consisted of Frank and his 2 daughters. The girl's mother had recently passed away from cancer, leaving the family grief-stricken and struggling to adjust to their drastically changed lives when Daniel broke into their home. He noticed the family portraits, which radiated a sense of closeness and warmth. This enraged Daniel, who felt deeply unhappy with his own life. To him, such a family seemed like an impossible dream. It was then that he devised a sinister plan toward the end of 1986. One evening, Tina Bowen received an anonymous call from a young man who introduced himself as Daniel LaPlante. When Tina asked how he had gotten her phone number, Daniel claimed he attended the same school as her and had obtained it through a mutual friend. Curious, Tina asked if they had met before, and Daniel provided a false description of himself to spark her interest. He claimed to have bright blonde hair, an athletic build, and said he lived in her neighborhood. During their conversations, which continued for about a week, Daniel was very polite and charming, successfully gaining Tina's trust. After much persuasion, Daniel convinced Tina to go on a date with him. He offered to pick her up from her home, and his imagined charm seemed to win her over. However, when the big evening arrived, Daniel made no effort to clean up his appearance when he showed up at the Bowen house and rang the doorbell. Tina immediately realized that everything he had claimed on the phone was untrue. As she opened the door, she saw that Daniel looked nothing like his description. His clothes were dirty, his physique was far from athletic, and his hair was dark instead of blonde. Despite her disappointment, Tina felt there might still be some trace of the charming man she had spoken with beneath it all. So, she decided to give him a chance. While they were walking together, Tina shared with Daniel that her mother had recently passed away from cancer. Instead of offering comfort, Daniel began asking her unsettling questions about her mother's appearance after death, what it was like to witness death up close, and the extent of her mother's suffering before she passed. The conversation was so unusual and inappropriate that it felt nothing like the casual evening chats Tina was used to. An hour into the date, Tina didn't leave, though she found the entire experience deeply strange and upsetting. She had never encountered someone so fixated on her mother's death, and Daniel's blunt, insensitive questions showed no regard for the pain she and her family had endured. This left she feeling profoundly sad. Tina later expressed her sadness to her younger sister, saying how much she missed their mother and how desperately she wished to speak with her again. One evening, while home alone, Tina and her sister decided to try contacting their mother's spirit using a Ouija board. They went down to the basement and, with little expectation that it would work, began the ritual. However, their efforts were unsuccessful when they heard their father returning from work. The sisters quickly hid the Ouija board and went back to their room. Later that night, just after midnight, Tina and Karen were startled awake by a series of knocks on their bedroom wall. Excited, the sisters believed it was their mother attempting to communicate with them. They felt their spiritualism session had not been in vain when they asked directly if it was truly their mother. A loud knock sounded on the wall, which the girls took as a definite yes. For several nights, strange events continued to occur, but only Tina and Karen were aware of them. However, when they tried to show their father the supernatural activity, nothing happened. It all began with faint knocks on the walls, but soon objects started disappearing. Items left on the table were found scattered on the floor the next day. The girls noticed furniture moving on its own, and food and drinks vanishing mysteriously. These occurrences unsettled them, and they began doubting that it was their mother trying to communicate. After all, their mom wouldn't frighten them like this. When the girls explained everything to Frank, he dismissed their claims. He believed the so-called supernatural events were just the girls acting out. Frank assumed Tina and Karen were seeking attention and tried to remain patient, convinced they would eventually overcome their pain. However, as time went on, Tina and Karen became increasingly terrified of their own home. The knocks on the walls and other strange happenings were driving them to the brink. Still, Frank refused to believe Tina and Karen. In desperation, Tina decided to confront the spirit directly. Now, she's certain it wasn't their late mother, Tina grabbed a knife from the kitchen and, along with Karen, went down to the basement. On one of the walls, they found a message written in red letters, which they immediately assumed was blood. The message read, "I am in your room. Find me." Terrified, Tina and Karen ran to the neighbor's house. Desperate to escape the torment they believed was caused by the spirit they had summoned, Tina and Karen anxiously waited for their father to return home from work. When Frank arrived, he immediately noticed the chaos upon seeing the message on the basement wall. He quickly realized it was written in tomato sauce. Furious, he lashed out at his daughters, scolding them for going too far and damaging their own home. He told them they needed a healthier way to deal with their pain, and even threatened to send Tina and Karen to a psychotherapist after this unsettling incident. Everything seemed to go back to normal. The supernatural events stopped, and the family began to relax. Life resumed its usual peaceful rhythm. The girls behaved calmly, and Frank continued his work as if nothing had happened. However, one day, a knock on the wall signaled the ghost's return. Tina and Karen, consumed by fear, returned to the basement, where all their troubles had begun. Suddenly, they heard another loud knock from upstairs. Panicked, they ran to Tina's bedroom, only to find a chilling message written in large red letters on the wall. "I'm back. Find me if you can." Tina grabbed her sister's hand, and they fled the house, seeking help from their neighbor, alarmed by the sister's story and their state. The neighbor promptly called Frank to inform him of what was happening. When Frank heard that his daughters were involved in another disturbing incident, he rushed home to address the situation. Convinced his daughters' actions were escalating, he decided to get to the bottom of it. Upon arriving at the neighbor's house, Frank questioned Tina and Karen about the events, shaking with fear. They said everything, including the unsettling message they had discovered, determined to put an end to their fears. Frank decided to go back to the house alone to investigate. As he stepped inside, Frank was met with chaos. The entire house was in disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor. He immediately realized this mess was far beyond what his daughters could have caused. When he entered Tina's bedroom, he found the same disturbing message the girls had described earlier, and now an additional chilling note was scrawled beneath it. "Marry me, confused and uneasy." Frank felt something was terribly wrong. A shiver ran down his spine as he sensed a presence behind him. Turning around, his heart sank. In the corner of the room stood a young man. The man was dressed in Frank's late wife's wedding dress and a blonde wig, even more horrifying. He was holding an axe, though shaken to his core. Frank quickly realized one thing. This was no ghost. Frank chased the intruder until this man fled and disappeared from sight immediately afterward. He called the police. Investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a hidden space behind a closet in one of the rooms. Inside the wall, they found a small door leading to an underground cavity or passageway between the house's walls, large enough for someone to move through. When a police officer entered the hidden area, they found Daniel curled up in a ball in one corner. Daniel was arrested, with Frank identifies him as the man in the wedding dress who threatened Frank with an axe. Later, authorities uncovered more troubling details about the incident. Tina confided in her father about an unsettling date she had gone on with Daniel a few months earlier. Investigators determined that Daniel had used the hidden passageways to torment Tina and Karen inside the space. Police found a sleeping bag, clothing belonging to the family, and leftover food. The most disturbing discovery, however, was that the secret space connected to every room in the house. This allowed Daniel to move through the walls undetected, spy on the family, and communicate with the girls through the distinct knocking sounds that had terrified them at the time of his arrest. 16-year-old Daniel was sent to a juvenile facility when he turned 17. Court documents were filed to begin trying his case as an adult. He faced multiple charges, including robbery, burglary, and property damage. In October 1987, Daniel was released on bail after his mother paid nearly $10 for his release after returning to his mother and stepfather's home. Daniel was instructed to stay out of trouble and await his court date on December 11, 1987. However, he ignored these instructions and resumed burglarizing nearby homes during one of these break-ins. He found a weapon, which he took with him in November. His stepfather discovered the weapon hidden in a laundry basket when confronted. Daniel lied and refused to reveal where he had obtained the weapon, although his stepfather confiscated it. It was unclear whether Daniel had access to another one on December 1, 1987. Daniel walked approximately 2 kilometers to reach the large, comfortable mansion of the Gustafson family. The family consisted of 33-year-old Priscilla, her husband Andrew, their 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, and Priscilla is pregnant with their 3rd child. The Gustafson family were a close-knit family dedicated to helping others. Andrew worked as a lawyer and was often away from home, while Priscilla worked at a kindergarten, sang in a choir, and actively participated in their church. On that tragic day, when Daniel broke into their home, only Priscilla and William were there. At this time, Abigail was still at school. He overpowered Priscilla, dragged her into the bedroom, and assaulted her. Afterwards, he suffocated her with a pillow to muffle the sound, and then attacked her twice in the head. Once Priscilla was dead, Daniel turned his attention to William. He carried the boy to a filled bathtub on the 2nd floor and drowned him. Shortly after Abigail arrived home from school, Daniel immediately grabbed Abigail, took her to the bathtub on the 1st floor, and drowned her in it. Just like William, when Andrew arrived at the house around 6 p.m., he immediately sensed something was wrong. The children were not playing as they usually did, and his wife did not come to greet him in the hallway when he called out for Priscilla. There was no response. Concerned, Andrew went to the bedroom, where he discovered a horrifying scene. Priscilla was lying lifeless in an unnatural position, with bloodstains all around, in shock. Andrew called the police right away. He could not even search the house to find the children when the investigators arrived. They found Andrew in such a state of shock that he was unable to think clearly during their search of the house. The police discovered the bodies of the children. Among the evidence collected were 2 spent cartridges from a weapon, strands of the attacker's hair on the bed and on Priscilla's body, an open beer can, and shoe prints near the entrance. Suspicion quickly fell on Daniel, a recently paroled young man who lived near the Gustafson home. He was known for his skill in breaking into nearby houses, which made him a prime suspect. While investigators were searching for him, Daniel was at the city library when questioned about his whereabouts on December 1. He claimed he had been at a family birthday party. He denied any involvement in the case of the Gustafson family and expressed sorrow over what had occurred. The police initially appeared to believe his story, but later, they visited Daniel's home with additional questions and a search warrant. When Daniel was sitting on the porch, spotted the police car. He immediately realized they were there for him, so he fled and hid in the woods. Daniel's actions confirmed the investigators' suspicions were right, and them to search Daniel's house inside. They discovered several shoe soles that matched the footprints found near the Gustafson home. They also found fibers that appeared to be connected to the crime. A sock with saliva stains likely used to gag Priscilla. A .22 caliber shell casing similar to one found at the crime scene, and a cordless phone stolen from the Gustafson home. Additionally, the Daniel family's car was examined. They revealing weapon in the glove compartment. Police quickly called for reinforcements to search for Daniel, the main suspect in the case of the Gustafson family. Over 50 officers participated in the search, aided by helicopters and sniffer dogs that thoroughly combed the forest. A crucial tip came from an emergency call. The caller revealed that Daniel had threatened her with a gun and forced her to drive him away in her truck. Thankfully, she managed to escape. This information helped investigators identify the model of the car Daniel used to flee on the run. He committed several additional robberies, leaving witnesses at the scenes who later reported him to the police. Daniel LaPlante was arrested on December 3, 1987, at 6:03 p.m. while trying to hide behind a garbage can in Ayers Town at the time of his arrest. He was armed and had committed several crimes while evading capture. Daniel's trial began in October 1988, when he was 18 years old, although most of his crimes occurred when he was a minor. The judge decided to try him as an adult. Daniel pleaded not guilty. Despite strong evidence against him, Daniel's defense claimed he was mentally unfit to stand trial, but a psychiatric evaluation determined that he could understand right from wrong and was fit for trial. The jury found Daniel LaPlante guilty of murdering the Gustafson family and sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole in 1993. Daniel attempted to appeal his sentence, arguing that the search warrant for his home was issued improperly, but he was unsuccessful. In 2000, Daniel requested a transfer to another prison due to safety concerns after receiving threats from fellow inmates, and this request was approved then, in 2013. Daniel expressed dissatisfaction with not being allowed to practice his religion freely because his rituals would have required ingredients like blood and banned substance. In 2017, Daniel submitted a petition seeking a reduced sentence, claiming he was under 18 when he committed the crimes, so he should not be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He aimed to serve just 1 life sentence instead of 3 consecutive ones. However, his request was denied because he was required to serve time for each life he had ruined. His statement to the judge was as follows: "I cannot adequately express the weight of my actions. I have taken the lives of 3 innocent people because of my choices. A 5-year-old boy will never celebrate his 6th birthday, and 7-year-old girls will never turn 8. Their mother will not have a 3rd child, and I have robbed an unborn baby of its first breath. This woman may never hear the words, 'I love you' again to my family. I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused. My remorse is profound and heartfelt." In 2019, Daniel LaPlante applied for parole again, but the authorities was decided that his request would not be reviewed until 2032. Many believe that Daniel lacks the capacity for remorse or any genuine feelings, and they see him as someone who is capable of psychological torment and brutal killings. This raises concerns that if he is released, he may seek out new victims. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of April Millsap. What could happen to a young woman simply walking through a quiet suburban neighborhood that is considered one of the safest in America? Normally, there would be nothing to worry about, but when a real predator lurks in the shadows, even the safest places can become the scene of a horrific tragedy. April Millsap, 14 years old by the summer of 2014. She was living with her family in Armada, a small town in Michigan, USA. April was a friendly and sweet girl who attended a local high school. She was an only child, and her parents had divorced when she was 6. After the divorce, her mother began a relationship with another man, who later became April's stepfather. April quickly grew close to her stepfather, and they developed a warm bond. April was a cheerful girl with a sense of humor, always bringing joy to her family. Her positive attitude helped her form a close circle of friends. She was creative, loved drawing, stayed active, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Despite her young age, April seemed mature and independent by the time she turned 14. She often walked her dog alone and enjoyed spending time with her friends while maintaining a close relationship with her family. April also had a boyfriend named Austin Schutt, who was a year older than her. They attended the same school and had been dating for about a year at the time of these events. In 2014, the town of Armada had a population of about 1.7 people. It was considered a safe and family-friendly place where everyone knew each other. However, as life sometimes proves, even the safest places can attract danger. Crimes in Armada were rare, but when they did occur, they caused significant alarm on July 24, 2014. The summer holidays were in full swing. That day, April didn't have any plans to go out or meet friends. She slept until noon and spent most of the day on her computer, chatting with friends and playing games. Around 6 p.m., she decided to take her dog, Penny, for a walk. April often brought Penny along when she met friends or her boyfriend, Austin. That evening, she chose one of her usual walking routes, which she often used to relax. Her walks typically lasted no more than an hour. Her mother, Jennifer, waited for her at home without concern, but when an hour and a half passed and April still hadn't returned, Jennifer became increasingly anxious when April didn't respond to her calls or text messages. So she reached out to April's boyfriend, assuming they might be together. However, Austin told her he hadn't seen April all day and had only communicated with her online. Jennifer's worry deepened, and she began contacting April's friends and classmates, but no one knew where April could be. About half an hour later, there was a knock at the door, hoping it was April returning from her walk. Jennifer felt a brief sense of relief. Instead, she found Austin and his friends standing on the doorstep. They had come to check on April because they were also concerned. Austin then showed Jennifer a message he had received from April at 6:28 p.m., roughly 40 minutes after she had left the house to walk the dog. Although Austin initially said he hadn't heard from her, he admitted to seeing the message later, either because he hadn't noticed it right away or he had been out of network coverage at the time. The message contained a chilling statement: "They tried to kidnap me." Alarmed by this, Austin had immediately started searching for her, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Jennifer called her husband, who at work, alarmed. He left his job immediately to join the search. He joined Jennifer and Austin, and the three decided to split up to cover more ground along the routes April usually walked. Jennifer also contacted the police, who promptly joined the efforts to find April. Shortly afterward, April was found. A man and a woman jogging along one of the trails came across a dog on a leash. Penny, the dog, seemed extremely agitated. When the woman attempted to grab the leash, Penny ran off, but stopped periodically. As if trying to guide them somewhere, they followed Penny into a dense thicket, where they discovered the body of a girl. The victim was later identified as 14-year-old April Millsap by the time her family arrived. Forensic experts were already working at the site. In Armada, the local police force consisted of only 2 officers, neither of whom was trained for cases of this nature. Serious crimes were almost unheard of in the area, and the small force was sufficient for handling minor issues like petty theft. However, this case was different. None of the local officers had ever dealt with a violent murder, and their investigative resources were minimal. The sheriff immediately reached out to more capable authorities at the county level. Law enforcement from other regions was quickly brought in to assist with the investigation. As they had more resources and experience, April was discovered lying on her back at the bottom of a ravine. Her shoes had been removed and were found a few meters away. Her clothing and underwear had been pulled off, suggesting a clear abuse motive. However, further investigation revealed that she had not been abused. Detectives theorized that the attacker may have attempted but failed, possibly because April fought back fiercely or because something like a passerby or the dog interrupted the assault. Regardless, she was subjected to a brutal beating. Her body was covered in bruises, ranging from defensive wounds to severe injuries on her face, which was so disfigured it appeared almost crushed. The forensic examination identified at least 48 separate injuries, many concentrated on her face and neck. Her body was covered in dried blood. There were signs of compression on her neck, but they didn't match the typical patterns seen in manual strangulation or the use of an object. Instead, the injuries on her face and neck bore unusual marks, which forensic analysis confirmed were caused by the tread of a shoe. This indicated that the attacker had stomped on her repeatedly. The forensic report concluded that April's death was the result of being trampled. Marks resembling the sole of a large sneaker were found on her head and neck. Considering the level of violence and the potential motive, investigators believed the perpetrator was likely a large man. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted over 10 minutes, during which the girl endured immense agony before dying. Identifying the victim initially proved difficult due to the severe facial injuries, which rendered her unrecognizable. Similarly, her mother was already unidentifiable from the start. The girl's stepmother, boyfriend, and the boyfriend's friend were brought in for police questioning to narrow down the list of possible suspects. The initial investigation focused on her mother, Jennifer, to determine if there were any events or threats that could be related to the case. However, investigators quickly determined that Jennifer had no conflicts, troubles, or unusual events related to her daughter's death. After ruling this possibility out, they turned their attention to April's boyfriend, Austin. To continue to clarify the details of the case, suspicion arose when Austin admitted that his relationship with the victim had been strained recently. They argued often and were on the brink of breaking up shortly before the murder. They had a heated argument. Adding to investigators' doubts was a chilling message April had sent to Austin just before the crime. She told him that someone had attempted to kidnap her, but he chose to ignore this alarming warning. Austin claimed he couldn't respond because the message arrived too late for him to see it. It seems there was a delay in delivery. Detectives noted that after receiving the message, he reacted very slowly, did not inform the police, and instead decided to search for her on his own. Austin explained that he was still upset with his girlfriend and believed the message was an attempt to manipulate him. He thought she was trying to provoke his attention and concern to push him toward reconciliation, not realizing the gravity of the situation regarding the quarrel. Austin insisted that April's behavior was incomprehensible. The most recent conflict had seemingly come out of nowhere, and he couldn't clearly explain the reasons behind their disagreements. Instead, he placed the blame on her. This only deepened the detective's suspicions, as it suggested Austin might have had a motive for the attack. In many cases, such incidents are committed by partners. As a result, the officers decided to detain him longer and asked him to tell them how his day went in all the details in order to analyze his movements and establish an alibi. Austin said that around 4 p.m., he met a friend to help carry a TV into a house. Afterward, they went to the nearest McDonald's for a snack. His account was later confirmed by surveillance camera footage from the cafe, which showed him there at the specified time, around 6:30 p.m. Just a few minutes after the message about the attempted kidnapping was sent, it became clear that Austin could not have been involved in the murder, since Austin was ruled out as the killer. Investigators turned their attention to the victim's mobile phone, hoping it might provide crucial information. They suspected April might have received a message from the stalker pursuing her, but her mobile phone could not be found at the crime scene. Detectives theorized that the killer had taken it, turned it off to prevent tracking, and discarded it elsewhere to find the phone and other evidence. A thorough search was conducted along the route April was believed to have taken, but no clues were initially found. Law enforcement, specialized dogs, and the FBI joined the search effort after nearly a full day of searching with no results. A breakthrough occurred the next day. The girl's mobile phone was discovered about a kilometer from the crime scene and was immediately sent to a forensic lab for analysis around the same time. News of the brutal attack spread widely through local newspapers and TV channels. Authorities appealed for witnesses who might have noticed anything unusual on the trail near the time of the crime. However, in the early stages, this only heightened public fear and anxiety. What shocked people most was the sheer brutality of the attack and the fact that it occurred in broad daylight, leaving everyone feeling unsafe. Then, a girl came forward to the police with potentially valuable information. She explained that around 6 p.m. on the day April was killed, she was at home looking out her window when she noticed a white van she had never seen before passing by. A man was driving, with another young man in the passenger seat. The van was moving very slowly, as if the occupants were searching for something or someone. This struck her as odd. When they noticed her watching from the window, they stopped and stared at her, even pointing toward her house. The encounter made her feel uneasy. Afterward, they drove away. Upon hearing about April's murder, the girl became worried that these two men might have been involved. She feared they could have spotted April as a target and attacked her. Detectives found this information reliable and important to the investigation. They considered it plausible that a white van had been driving around the area looking for a victim, and April was unfortunate enough to catch the men's attention. The police appealed to the public once again, sharing a description of the white van and a composite sketch of the two men inside, hoping to gather more reliable leads. The following day, a man and his friend contacted the police. They admitted to driving a van in the area that evening. They explained that they were construction workers and had been driving slowly through the neighborhood because the driver wanted to show his colleague some houses where he had previously worked. One of these houses happened to be where the girl lived. Their account was verified, and local residents confirmed their story. Clearing them of suspicion, the men were eager to assist the investigation in any way they could. The day after the incident, several people contacted the police to report a suspicious motorcycle and its driver. Witnesses reported seeing a schoolgirl walking her dog along a path around 6:30 p.m. They noted that she wasn't alone at the time. She was accompanied by an older man who was pushing his motorcycle by hand. The two appeared to be walking and talking casually at the time. The witnesses assumed the man was her father, as his behavior seemed calm and April showed no signs of fear. However, upon reflecting on the situation later, doubts about the man began to emerge. None of April's friends or family recognized him based on the description provided, suggesting he was a complete stranger to her, according to witnesses. This encounter occurred around the same time April had texted her boyfriend about an attempted kidnapping, raising further suspicions about the man, since there were very few motorcyclists in town. The man and his unusual motorcycle quickly caught the attention of locals. The motorcycle was described as having a rare blue and white color scheme, making it easy to identify thanks to this detailed description. Police located a motorcycle matching it just 3 days after April's murder, on April 27, 2014. It was found parked in the driveway of a local house. When officers arrived, the motorcycle was still there. The officers approached a man working in the garden, who told them the motorcycle did not belong to him. Instead, it belonged to his 32-year-old friend, James Donald Van Callis, who lived in the neighboring town. About 30 kilometers from Armada, this information was verified. On April 28, officers met with James, the owner of the motorcycle, to question him about his whereabouts on the day April was killed. From the start, James was cooperative and willing to answer all questions. He claimed he had been at a friend's house in Armada during that time, and his friend confirmed the alibi. However, authorities found the alibi unreliable, as the witness was a friend who might have been covering for him. Additionally, there were minor discrepancies in the timeline. When asked about the shoes he wore that day, James provided a pair of white sneakers. However, the tread on the shoes did not match the marks found on the victim's body. Detectives decided to take a closer look at James to eliminate him as a potential suspect. While he had a criminal record, it was not for violent offenses. His convictions included breaking, as well as failing to pay child support, and the robberies occurring in 2005 and 2006. However, upon reviewing James's background, the police uncovered something far more alarming. His father, James Bernard Van Callis, was a registered abuse offender. The elder James Bernard had been convicted of abusing a 13-year-old minor at the time. Both men lived in the same family home. Authorities considered the possibility that James Bernard and James Donald might be involved in criminal activities. However, the investigation primarily focused on the son, as witnesses had identified a middle-aged man matching the witness's description. Searches of their home revealed that James Bernard and James Donald were growing the territory of the prohibited plant. The quantity was so large that they were arrested and charged with distributing the prohibited banned substance. This allowed law enforcement to detain them, ensuring public safety and preventing the suspects from fleeing the state while the investigation continued. The police thoroughly inspected all the shoes found in the men's house, but none matched the tread marks found on the victim's body. Additionally, numerous DNA tests were conducted on the clothing, but no traces linked to April were discovered. However, forensic experts who examined the motorcycle were confident that James Donald had used strong cleaning agents shortly before it was seized by the police for analysis. They suspected this was an attempt to remove evidence. James Donald was quite successful. As the police no traces were found, the detectives quickly confirmed their theory. When James Donald's girlfriend contacted the police, she reported that on the day of the murder, in April, she came home to find he meticulously cleaning his shoes, motorcycle, and helmet with strong disinfectants. This unusual behavior made her suspicious. The injuries on the victim's head were consistent with marks that could have been caused by a helmet, leading investigators to believe James Donald might have used it during the assault. She also revealed that he had traveled by car that day to a nearby town where the victim lived. Supposedly to visit his friend, James Donald's girlfriend described a pair of black and white sneakers that James Donald frequently wore and loved. However, these shoes did not match the ones he handed over to detectives when they questioned him. After that night, she never saw those sneakers again, leading her to believe James Donald had disposed of them. Fearing he couldn't fully clean away the evidence, she further detailed her troubling relationship with James Donald, describing him as extremely abusive and controlling. Recently, she had felt more like his hostage or property than his girlfriend. He tightly controlled every aspect of her life, even forbidding her from leaving the house unless he accompanied her. She suspected him from the start, but feared he would kill her if she contacted the police. Now that James Bernard and James Donald had been arrested, she could finally speak freely. According to James Donald's own admission to his girlfriend, he claimed he was cleaning his belongings because they had been stained with machine oil while fixing his motorbike. However, she remained unconvinced. The police needed to confirm that the sneakers she described matched the ones James Donald commonly wore. They found photos on his social media page showing him wearing sneakers identical to her description, although James Donald had disposed of the pair he wore during the murder. The police located and purchased the same model when they compared the tread pattern to the marks on the victim's body. Forensic experts found an exact match. The investigation revealed that April had been trampled to death with shoes James Donald had purchased about a year before the attack. Further evidence was found on his computer, where investigators uncovered his disturbing interest in much younger girls. Additionally, crucial information came from April's phone using FBI lab analysis. It was discovered that she had a fitness app installed, which monitored her movements, steps, and heart rate, among other data. Shortly after sending a worrying message to her boyfriend, Austin, the data showed she suddenly began running. As if trying to escape from someone, James Donald reportedly approached the girl on his motorcycle and offered her something. Shortly afterward, she sent her boyfriend a message about an attempted kidnapping. Then she ran really fast to escape her pursuer. Minutes later, her fitness app recorded a sudden, chaotic, and extremely fast increase in her movements, lasting 10 to 15 minutes. This appears to have been the moment she fought for her life. Later, the criminal returned to his vehicle with the April's phone. The app recorded a steady speed of about 20 kilometers per hour, which continued until the phone was discarded about a kilometer from the attack site. Surveillance cameras along the biker's route captured footage of the motorcycle and identified the suspect as 32-year-old James Donald. Additionally, geolocation data from his mobile phone confirmed that, at the time of the attack, he was not with a friend, as he claimed, but near the crime scene. By this point, everyone was certain of his involvement in the murder. There was enough evidence to charge him with April's murder and proceed to court. However, a significant challenge remained. The lack of direct evidence. The police were unable to find any DNA linking James Donald to the victim. Of course, against this background, lawyers could effectively refer to indirectly provided evidence. Forensic experts were unable to find traces of the victim's blood on his belongings, equipment, or helmet. James Donald had meticulously cleaned everything and disposed of all incriminating items. It was clear that the man was highly experienced in this case. The prosecutor's office decided to proceed with the charges despite relying on indirect evidence. These evidences was enough to convince the jury of James Donald's guilt in October 2014. 3 months after the crime, James was formally charged, and the trial was scheduled for early 2016. It was believed that he attacked a teenage girl, April. After she rejected his advances, James Donald had spent considerable time online researching ways to attract much younger girls, particularly minors, but none of the advice seemed to work. Tragically, when April refused him, he reacted violently and attacked her. The defense argued that the prosecution lacked definitive proof of James's guilt and claimed the case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence, although James maintained his innocence. His arguments were unconvincing. As a last resort, his lawyer emphasized that James Donald had no prior record of serious crimes. However, this was not enough to sway the jury. After several hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found him guilty of attempted kidnapping, abuse, and first-degree murder. James Donald Van Callis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, April's mother spoke extensively. She expressed her satisfaction with the court's decision, relieved that the perpetrator would never be released. She was horrified that her child's life had been taken by an adult man simply because his advances were rejected. His actions and intentions were criminal from the start, but the level of cruelty he displayed was unimaginable. Despite this, James refused to admit his guilt or show any remorse. He continued to claim his innocence. Even after his conviction, he attempted to overturn the court's decision by filing an appeal with his lawyer, but it was unsuccessful. Now, he remains in prison for committing a heinous crime against an innocent young girl, April Millsap, in April's memory. A memorial garden was created near the spot where her life was tragically taken. A small statue of her dog, Penny, stands in the garden to honor the pet who led strangers to the scene of the crime. Back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Ashley Fallis. Ashley Fallis married her high school sweetheart right after finishing school, but their marriage lasted only a few years. During that time, she had 2 daughters. When the relationship ended, Ashley, just over 20 years old, she returned to her hometown with her children to live near her mother, Jenna, and stepfather, Joel. She found work as a respiratory therapist. Helping patients with breathing and heart issues became the sole provider for her family. Life was difficult, as her ex-husband was not involved in raising their daughters. Despite these hardships, Ashley was described by her mother and stepfather as cheerful, kind, and funny. She and her mother were particularly close, sharing a bond like best friends. In April 2007, Ashley met Tom Fallis, who seemed responsible and ready for family life. Unlike her ex-husband, their relationship progressed quickly, and a few months later, Ashley became pregnant with her 3rd child. 9 months later, they welcomed a son, Blake. 2 weeks after Blake's birth, Ashley and Tom got married. Tom also adopted Ashley's older daughters. However, Ashley's mother and stepfather felt she had rushed into having another child, like marrying Tom and entrusting him with her daughters. Despite knowing him for only a short time, the family settled in Evans, a small town about an hour north of Denver, Colorado. Ashley continued her work as a respiratory therapist, while Tom took a job as a correctional officer with the Weld County Sheriff's Office, Jenna admitted she found Tom strange from the start. She said, "I didn't like his mindset. He always thought he was right about everything." Tom came across as aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling toward Ashley. Jenna often tried to convince Ashley to leave her relationship with Tom. Things took a dramatic turn when their youngest son, Blake, was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, a condition causing fluid to build up in the brain. Ashley became focused on researching treatment options for Blake, who had to undergo several major surgeries and required constant care. The stress severely affected Ashley, leaving her depressed, anxious, and irritable. Caring for Blake's health also put a heavy strain on Ashley and Tom's relationship, leading to frequent arguments. By the summer of 2011, Ashley started contemplating divorce. However, Tom encouraged her to seek help from a psychotherapist. After starting medication, Ashley's mental health improved, and their relationship appeared to stabilize. By December 2011, the Fallis family decided to host a New Year's Eve party at their home, inviting family and friends. The preparations for the holiday provided a much distraction from their challenges. Just a few days before the celebration, Ashley discovered she was pregnant again. Filled with joy, she chose to stop taking her medication to protect the baby. For a brief moment, it seemed things were improving for the Fallis family, and thoughts of divorce faded away. Unfortunately, their happiness was short-lived. On the afternoon of December 31, 2011, Ashley started bleeding and feared she was having a miscarriage. Despite her worry, she continued getting ready for the party. That evening, guests started arriving at the Fallis' home, including Tom's parents, Ashley's mother and stepfather, her uncle, and several family friends. The atmosphere was lively as everyone enjoyed chatting and celebrating together. However, tension between Tom and Ashley became evident. They exchanged harsh remarks and occasionally argued during the evening. Ashley confided in a friend, saying she always knew that Tom hates her. Despite the conflict, Ashley and Tom still celebrated the new year with their guests as the party wound down and people began leaving. Ashley's uncle offered her illegal substances. Tom overheard this and became enraged. He scolded Ashley and accused her of unacceptable behavior. In the heat of the argument, Tom revealed to everyone that Ashley's fourth pregnancy had ended earlier that day. He shouted that Ashley always followed her mother's advice rather than thinking for herself. After the quarrel, Ashley went to put her children to bed while her parents prepared to leave at 12:40 a.m. Ashley stepped outside to say goodbye to her mother and stepfather, noticing that Ashley seemed upset. Her mother, Jenna, asked what was wrong. Ashley responded, "It's okay, Mom. It's just Tom. He's like that." She hugged her parents goodbye while Tom stood on the porch, waving as they drove away. Afterward, Ashley and Tom went back inside the house, where the atmosphere was tense, following a brief argument about illegal substances. The two went their separate ways. Tom went into the wardrobe to change when he suddenly heard the sound of a weapon being loaded in the bedroom. Knowing Ashley kept a weapon under her mattress, Tom shouted, asking what was going on, and hurried toward the bedroom. Before he could reach her, he heard the explosion. Tom rushed into the room and found Ashley lying on the floor, smoke lingering in the air. She had been injured in the back of the head. In a panic, Tom grabbed her, pressed his hand against the wound to stop the bleeding, and called 911 at 12:50 a.m. as Ashley lay unconscious but still alive. Tom gently closed her eyes and spoke to her, saying, "I'm here. You won't go. You won't leave me." In the early hours of New Year's Day, 2012, the Evans Police Department responded to an emergency call from the Fallis family home. The neighborhood was known to be safe, with low crime rates. Upon arrival, paramedics rushed Ashley to the hospital due wound to her head. Unfortunately, her injuries were critical, and Ashley passed away a few hours later. The police detained Tom at the scene. He was covered in blood and claimed that his wife had self-harm. He also mentioned that Ashley and her mother had attended a party earlier that evening, and Ashley had been very upset. However, suspicions quickly arose when a neighbor reported hearing screams from the house. The neighbor stated she heard Ashley screaming, begging Tom to get off her and let her go. During his interrogation, Tom denied the accusations. He stated that he did not witness his wife pulling the trigger and denied assaulting her. At any time during the interrogation, investigators asked Tom to undress so they could examine his body. They found fresh scratches on his chest. Tom explained the scratches by claiming he had injured himself while shaving his chest for the first time, which caused itching throughout the questioning. Tom appeared visibly nervous and anxious, but consistently denied having any physical contact with Ashley in the Fallis bedroom. Significant evidence suggested that a conflict had occurred. Photographs had been torn off the wall, hinting at a fight, and divorce papers were found displayed on the wall. Ashley also had bruises on her legs, according to Ashley's mother. Tom had been very angry with them when they said goodbye at the party. At the end of the party, he even shouted, "I want you all to die." Despite this evidence, Tom was released without charges. After the interrogation, Ashley's parents were heartbroken and couldn't understand why he was released so easily. Jenna was convinced that her daughter would never willingly leave her children. Ashley loved life and had plans for the future. On January 5, 2012, the medical examiner concluded that Ashley had died from a weapon wound to the back of the head and ruled it self-harm. 2 months later, the case was officially closed. Ashley's grieving parents struggled to accept this conclusion. Eventually, Tom and his children moved to Indiana, where he pursued graduate school. Despite their suspicions, Ashley's parents tried to maintain a good relationship with Tom to stay connected with their grandchildren. However, they never stopped believing that their daughter's death was caused by Tom. 2 years passed until, in early 2014, a local television reporter, Justin Joseph, began his own investigation into the Ashley Fallis case. Joseph spent months interviewing neighbors and investigating the case. After 4 months, the case took a significant turn. A young neighbor of Tom, his name is Nick Glover, revealed an important detail to Joseph. Nick and his mother, Kathy Glover, claimed he heard Tom yelling at his parents outside the house, saying, "God, I can't believe I did this," when his parents asked, "What are you saying?" Tom reportedly yelled, "I attacked her." Nick had informed the police immediately after the tragedy, and his statement was written down. However, no mention of Nick Glover's and Kathy account was found in the official police report. Joseph's report also uncovered another person who confirmed that Tom had confessed. A local police was present at the scene of the tragedy stated that Tom admitted to attack Ashley. Another neighbor also told the reporter that, on the night of the incident, she had called to the police, saying Tom attacked his wife. However, the police report misrepresented this information, stating instead that a woman had called to report that Ashley had self-harm. She also told the police that she had heard Ashley screaming from the Fallis family home, saying, "Leave me alone." Despite this, at that time, the neighbor was not questioned further, which was considered a serious omission since she was a key witness that night. Ashley's parents believed the police had rushed to close the case and blamed Ashley for her own death. Despite the circumstantial evidence, thanks to Joseph's investigative work, Chief Rick Brandt began to reevaluate the case and the actions of his officers, who had quickly hushed it up. This time, the Fort Collins Police Department took over the investigation. They considered the testimonies of the neighbors who heard Ashley screaming. Tom continued to deny his involvement in Ashley's death, maintaining that she had pulled the trigger herself on New Year's Eve. Curiously, more than 2 years after Ashley's death, Tom handed over to the police what he claimed was a suicide note written by Ashley. The note read, "Dear Tom, I am sorry for your pain. I am a loser in everything. I don't even love my daughters and son. I love you, but I just can't stand this life anymore." In November 2014, Tom Fallis was charged with the death of Ashley Fallis. He was detained and arrested in Indiana after 3 years of freedom, thinking he had escaped justice. In March 2016, a trial was held against Tom. During the trial, Tom's lawyer argued that he could not have killed his beloved wife, the mother of his 3 children. The lawyer claimed that Ashley had been struggling with mental health issues. He presented documents showing that Ashley had been diagnosed with a mental illness in the summer of 2011. The defense argued that she was impulsive, prone to self-destruction, and had been very drunk on the night of her death. They also claimed that she had suffered a miscarriage on New Year's Eve, further contributing to her distress. Ashley's uncle, however, stated that their family did not believe Ashley had taken her self-harm. They were convinced that Tom was responsible for her death. Ashley's therapist also insisted that his patient had no self-destructive tendencies. He confirmed that she was taking certain medications. However, the doctor did not know that. In addition to them, she was prescribed prescription medicine from other specialists. Ashley apparently hid another important thing from the doctor: information, including the alleged suicide notes she wrote. It turned out that Ashley had written 2 similar notes, one of which was dated July 24, 2011. Ashley's mother, Jenna, insisted that her daughter was fine. But Tom behaved inappropriately that night. He was overly angry and aggressive toward her and toward Ashley. Jenna said that at the end of the party, she watched as Tom walked up the stairs, stood right in front of Ashley, and told Ashley, "I hate you all, and I wish you all died." Then he went into the bedroom and slammed the door loudly. Rick also testified at the trial, confirming that he heard Tom confess to his parents that he attacked his wife. However, his parents denied this information and fully supported their son. A forensic expert who spent 400 hours studying the case explained to the jury where Ashley's head should have been when the explosion rang out. The expert claimed Ashley pulled the trigger herself. The prosecution called a second world-renowned forensic expert, who told the jury that he had come to the opposite conclusion from the previous medical examiner. In his opinion, Tom was next to Ashley at the time of the explosion, and most likely, there was a struggle between the spouses for the weapon, in which Tom won. The jury took only 3.5 hours to reach their verdict. Tom was found not guilty of second-degree murder and of all less serious crimes. Tom was free again. He refused to give any comments to journalists and the media. The jury explained that they believed that Ashley was mentally ill, which is why she self-harmed. Ashley's parents still don't believe that their daughter could abandon 3 children and voluntarily end her life. They are very upset that Tom was released. Ashley's 2 daughters and son remained under the care of Tom and live in Indiana. And Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joel, received the legal right to see their grandchildren. Hello again, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Michael Weiss. Jake Nolan was born in New York, USA, as the youngest child in his family, with an older brother and an older sister. The family lived on Long Island and was relatively wealthy. Jake was known for being kind and respectful to everyone. However, at the age of 5, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. This condition affected him throughout his life, becoming more evident at the age of 15 when he began to experience mood swings. Despite facing many challenges, Jake had some positive moments in high school, including being recognized for winning a competition. However, this was also when he was diagnosed with anxiety and depression at the age of 17. Jake was hospitalized after a disturbing incident involving his parents after an argument. He threatened to commit end life with a kitchen knife during this time. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a serious condition. His parents tried to help him manage his health problems and regularly consulted specialists, but their efforts were not very successful. Jake was prescribed about 30 different medications. This alone led to serious side effects, often leaving him feeling worse than before. Many of the medications interacted negatively with each other, resulting in poor treatment outcomes during this time. Jake also began drinking and using drugs. When Jake started college, his parents hoped he would improve. At first, everything seemed fine, But then they received a worried call from the school. The dean wanted to know why Jake had been absent for the past 2 weeks. That's when his parents discovered that he had been in bed most of the time. His depression worsened, and he began using illegal drugs regularly. This alarmed his family, who wanted to help him. But even at 19, Jake showed no interest in studying or working. Instead, he spent all his time having fun and avoiding responsibility. One day, Jake's mother spoke to her niece, Pamela Buckbinder, a successful psychiatrist in New York by her 40s. Pamela had won numerous awards and occasionally published articles in popular magazines. Concerned about Jake, Pamela offered to take him into her home for a while and set up a makeshift rehab facility there. She promised to organize therapy sessions for Jake and monitor his medication instead of charging him for her help. Pamela asked Jake to assist her in caring for her 4-year-old son during the summer due to their family ties. They agreed to her plan. Pamela and Jake are cousins, and she saw this as an opportunity to strengthen their family bond while helping to care for her son. When Jake's mother shared this with him, he viewed it as a break from his family and agreed to stay with Pamela for a few months, during which he would help care for her son. Pamela's husband is another prominent psychiatrist, Michael Weiss. Pamela and Michael had a rocky relationship. They often argued and got into physical fights. In one incident, Pamela was arrested for throwing a glass at Michael, causing a head injury that required stitches. Pamela argued that they were both equally at fault, as Michael was also arrested after another altercation and was accused of threatening her. Pamela and Michael ended their relationship in 2009, after which Pamela moved to Greenwich Village in Manhattan in 2011. They began a custody battle during this time. Pamela often spoke ill of Michael to their son, portraying him as a bad father. She also spread false and damaging stories about him to others, apparently trying to turn the child and others against him. This behavior was primarily intended to gain an advantage in the custody dispute and secure a substantial child support payment. By 2012, the couple finally reached an agreement that allowed Michael to spend weekends with their children. However, an unusual condition imposed by Pamela was that Michael purchase a life insurance policy on himself, naming their son Calder as the beneficiary, with Pamela as the trustee. Eventually, Michael, exhausted from the legal battle, reluctantly agreed to this questionable request. The custody battle reached its final stages after Jake moved into Pamela's home. Jake began sharing his thoughts and struggles with Pamela, who gave him advice, monitored his medications, and made his life much easier. Jake became the godfather to Pamela's son Calder, and often said that the experience gave his life meaning. On November 12, 2012, Michael spent the day with his son, Calder, for the first time. He felt excited because he had reached an agreement with Pamela about custody, allowing him to interact with Calder without stress. Michael's schedule that morning was to take Calder to kindergarten and then go to work. In the afternoon, Calder would return home to his mother, while Michael was attending a therapy session with a patient. Jake appeared at the door with a worried look on his face and carrying a large bag. Michael realized that Jake knew he had moved in with Pamela and was dealing with some mental health issues. However, Michael was unsure about the current situation because he was with a patient. He asked Jake to wait outside until he finished. When the therapy session ended, Michael found Jake still waiting in the hallway. Dr. Michael asked him about the large bag. Jake claimed that it contained important documents for Calder's kindergarten that he had helped Pamela prepare. However, Michael was skeptical about this explanation. Michael asked Jake to leave the bag outside because he was worried that Jake might plant a listening device there. However, Jake insisted he couldn't leave the bag behind as it could be stolen. Eventually, Michael relented and allowed Jake to bring the bag inside with him upon entering the office. Jake asked to use the restroom first. Later, he attacked Michael with a sledgehammer, Fortunately, Michael avoided a fatal blow to the head. But Jake struck him in the shoulder. Jake then lost his balance because the sledgehammer was too heavy, dropped it, and pulled out a knife to attack Michael. Michael fought back, pushed Jake away, tried to run into the hallway, and called for help. People gathered in the hallway, and shortly after, Michael passed out from blood loss. Witnesses called the police and paramedics. Jake, however, didn't attempt to flee. Instead, he sat in the hallway and took pictures. When the paramedics arrived, they found Michael unconscious and Jake sitting beside him. Jake told the paramedics that Michael had attacked him first. Meanwhile, both Michael and Jake were taken to the hospital, where they were placed under police supervision. Forensic experts retrieved the sledgehammer and knife from Michael's office. Upon examination, they found a DNA sample on the handle of the sledgehammer that matched Jake's. The knife was also analyzed and determined to have come from Pamela's kitchen, inside a large bag belonging to Jake. The police found a pack of cigarettes, zip ties, and a hand-drawn map of the building where Michael worked, showing multiple entrances and exits. The police traced the bag to a purchase near Pamela's home. They reviewed surveillance footage from a nearby hardware store and observed that Jake had bought the sledgehammer used in the attack, along with zip ties and a bag. The night before, Pamela was seen next to him, paying cash for the items, possibly aware of the planned crime. Although Michael suffered multiple injuries, none were life-threatening. Jake was taken to the hospital but was released on $200 bail while awaiting a hearing on the attempted murder charge. He is allowed to stay with his parents in Miami. Jake spoke to the police and claimed that the attack was self-defense, stating that Michael had taken Jake's sledgehammer and tried to injure himself. When Jake realized that his lie was not convincing, he decided to tell the police the truth about what had happened. He accused Pamela of being the real mastermind, claiming that she had manipulated him and turned him against Michael. Pamela then provided the police with Jake's medical history, which indicated that he had suffered from a number of serious mental health issues. The police investigated Jake's testimony, and evidence supporting his claim quickly emerged. Pamela had an ulterior motive to harm her ex-husband. In November 2013, Michael Weiss filed a lawsuit against Pamela, alleging that his ex-wife pressured him into taking out a $1 million life insurance policy. He pointed out that the attack occurred just 4 days after the contract was issued, which raised suspicions. Michael believed that this was a planned plot to benefit Pamela financially. Additionally, Jake's attorney secured a restraining order against Pamela, arguing that it was necessary to protect Jake's mental health from her influence. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Pamela, she was not arrested or questioned, and her medical license remained intact. Meanwhile, the investigation continued, and an expert was brought in to analyze the building blueprints found in Jake's bag. It was revealed that Pamela had drawn the blueprints, but she claimed that the maps were for Jake to find Michael and pick up Calder if necessary. Pamela was in regular contact with Jake before and after the attempted assassination. Their text messages showed that she was aware of his whereabouts and what was going on. After Jake sent a selfie to Michael following the attempted assassination, they had a long conversation that revealed the plan had failed. Jake expressed guilt for not being able to kill Michael during this time. Jake fully admitted his actions and showed a willingness to accept the consequences, no matter how severe they might be. He told detectives that Pamela had convinced him to kill Michael to free her from an abusive relationship that was harming both her and her young son at the time. Jake was so close to the boy that he wanted to help his relatives get rid of Michael. He did not know that Michael's life was insured for a significant amount of money and that Pamela could benefit from the insurance payout. Jake did not care about the money because his family supported him. However, Pamela manipulated him to the point that he was willing to do anything for her. Unfortunately, The case did not progress. Even after 2 years, the situation remained unchanged. As of 2015, Pamela was still living comfortably at home with her son, sharing custody with Michael, as there was no evidence to prove her involvement in the attempted murder. Meanwhile, Jake is in Miami, receiving comprehensive care, and his condition begins to improve as he starts to regain his sanity. Jake realizes that he has become a pawn in Pamela's scheme. Devoted to caring for her child and managing household responsibilities, he understands that Pamela never intended to help him. Instead, she aimed to use him for her own dubious purposes. Jake has overcome his harmful habits and envisions a future where he can start a family and raise children. However, he faces the serious possibility of being imprisoned for years due to the betrayal of someone he once trusted. Additionally, questions begin to arise regarding the nature of Jake's relationship with Pamela, which seems to extend beyond simple family support and therapeutic assistance. Their interactions resemble typical affectionate exchanges between newlyweds, and a photo of them together in bed has surfaced. It appears that Pamela is pursuing Jake with the intent of deepening their relationship. Possibly to manipulate him, Pamela recounted a fabricated story of having endured physical violence throughout her marriage. She eventually accused Michael of trying to gain custody of their son. Over time, Jake grew to believe her, insisting that he would do anything for Pamela. She convinced him that in order to survive, he needed to eliminate Michael. It was clear that Pamela was not strong enough to confront a robust adult man, making Jake a suitable candidate for her dangerous scheme. The trial began in March 2016, where the jury was presented with a detailed account of the events that took place on November 12, 2012. Jake recalled Pamela waking him up that morning, insisting that it was time to put their plan into action. She showered him with compliments, calling him her savior. After breakfast, she continued her manipulations. On November 11, they purchased a sledgehammer, zip ties, and a bag in preparation for their plan. The details of the plot were far more sinister than the events that transpired in Michael's office. Initially, Jake was supposed to attack Michael and torture him before he died. Pamela wanted Michael to suffer for as long as possible. Jake then went to Michael's office, entering through the service entrance, where security cameras recorded his arrival. Remarkably, he made no attempt to conceal his identity. With confidence, he walked down the hallway and approached Michael's office. At the time, Michael was examining a patient, forcing Jake to step back and wait outside. Jake was in the hallway. Rethinking his actions, he soon realized that if he backed out now, he wouldn't be able to face Pamela. There was no turning back. So he carried out the attack while awaiting trial. Jake undergoes evaluations from several psychiatrists, who noted that he was fully aware of his actions. Concluding that his decision to kill Michael was intentional, the jury deliberated and found Jake Nolan guilty of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison, while Pamela remained free on bail. This changed on October 19, 2017, when the police attempted to arrest Pamela and urged her to turn herself in, but she ignored their requests. When the search began, she could not be found at any known address and did not answer her cell phone or work phone. An anonymous source eventually informed the police of Pamela's whereabouts, and she was arrested at a friend's home. Pamela was charged with second-degree intentional homicide and first-degree assault. On September 7, 2022, Pamela Buchbinder admitted guilty to these charges to avoid a 25-year sentence. However, on October 11 of that year, she attempted to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs and had been assaulted by security guards. Her request to withdraw her guilty plea was denied. Ultimately, Pamela was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and her medical license was officially revoked. Jake felt deep remorse for his actions. His parents firmly believed in his innocence and were convinced that Pamela was responsible for his condition. Jake's parents stated that sending Jake to Pamela's home for treatment was the worst decision they ever made. Pamela, however, continued to maintain her innocence. The child's father, Michael, was granted custody. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Lauren Kanarek. Michael Barrassone, an Olympic equestrian champion, was regarded as one of the world's top trainers. He coached other Olympic athletes and represented the USA at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Barrassone owns two beautiful horse farms, one outside Palm Beach and one in New Jersey's prime horse country. He calls this one Hawthorne Hill, a paradise for horse enthusiasts. The property housed dozens of horses that required constant care. Lauren Kanarek contacted Michael with the dream of becoming an equestrian champion. Her passion for horses began at the age of 3, when she and her parents visited a small horse farm in Wellington, Florida. Seeing a horse for the first time left a lasting impression, and from that moment, she couldn't stop thinking about these animals. As she grew older, her desire to pursue equestrian sports only strengthened. Recognizing her passion, Lauren's father bought her first horse as a graduation gift, allowing her to fully embrace the hobby she loved. In March 2018, at an equestrian competition, Lauren caught the attention of Michael after her performance. Michael approached her and invited her to train at his equestrian club in New Jersey for Lauren, who was actively searching for the best trainer. This was an incredible opportunity. She was thrilled by the chance to train at Michael's prestigious club. However, no one could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead for both Michael and Lauren as they worked together. The one thing they undeniably shared was a deep, mutual love for horses. By that time, Lauren owned 2 horses. Michael spoke passionately about his equestrian club, saying, "This was my life. It was my home. I built it from scratch. It was my love." Michael provided Lauren with accommodations at his farm in New Jersey, where she moved in with her boyfriend, Rob Goodwin. They agreed that Lauren would pay Michael $5 a month for her training and housing. Lauren stayed in a white farmhouse that Michael shared with his assistants, Justin Harden and Mary Haskins Gray, who also worked in the equestrian field. Michael and Mary were not just colleagues. They were in a romantic relationship. Mary, who was divorced, had 2 children from her previous marriage, a daughter and a son. The group lived together peacefully, and Michael had a good relationship with everyone. For Lauren, it seemed as though her childhood dreams had come true, and her life appeared to be going well. She even shared photos on social network of herself with Michael, believing everything was perfect. However, her coach found her to be a challenging and demanding student. Stable workers noted that by the summer of 2019, tensions had risen between Michael and Lauren. The issues began when most of Lauren's sessions were led by his assistants, Justin and Mary. Lauren had hoped to train directly with the Olympic champion, not with his assistants. Each day, the atmosphere on the farm seemed to become increasingly intense, as though something terrible was about to happen. Lauren and Mary's relationship became increasingly strained. Lauren resented Michael for spending more time with Mary and wanted all his attention for herself. Unwilling to let anyone stand in her way, Michael understands the conflict but doesn't want to push Lauren away since she pays him every month. At the same time, he wanted to protect his romantic relationship with Mary. Frustrated, Lauren wasn't willing to accept the situation. Lauren, an active social network user, quickly launched an online campaign. She shared a narrative using a chessboard analogy. Michael was portrayed as the king trapped and defeated, while Mary was depicted as the queen who would need to be sacrificed to protect the castle. The stables. 2 weeks later, Lauren posted a message. "Anyone who continuously kicks a sleeping beast will sooner or later wake it up." Tensions in the Hawthorne Hill had reached a breaking point. Lauren expressed her growing concern for her horse's well-being to her father, saying, "They're the reason I wake up in the morning, and the reason I can't sleep at night." She believed her horses were being mistreated, claiming They were either underfed or overfed. Meanwhile, Michael's staff accused Lauren of violating the barn's rules, with one stable worker alleging that they had seen her sneaking into the barn at night. Rumors began to circulate that she was planning to do something with the horses. Lauren defended herself, explaining that one of her horses required special care. She and her boyfriend, Rob, hid a recording device in the barn. As Lauren claimed, she felt unsafe around Michael's staff. At the same time, she posted another angry message on social network, accusing Michael of racism and homophobia. Michael, enraged by the accusations, vehemently denied them, fearing the damage they could do to his career. The Olympic champion, who had worked for years to build his reputation, was terrified that everything he had achieved was being undermined. In her next post, Lauren claimed that the 6'3" man had been bullying her, leaving her fearful for her safety. However, there were no witnesses to support her allegations, which worked in Michael's favor. The stable staff, unaware of the full story, feared that something terrible might happen. Michael revealed that living with Lauren and her boyfriend under the same roof had become intolerable. He asked Lauren to take her belongings, including her horses, and leave with Rob. However, Lauren had no intention of leaving. Eventually, Michael and Mary decided to leave the house themselves. They relocated to Michael's winter property, just 30 minutes from Palm Beach, Florida. Mary's daughter was sent to camp, while her son went to live with his biological father, as staying together with the children no longer felt safe. On July 31, 2019, at 9 p.m., Michael called the police, saying, "There's a war going on, and it needs to be dealt with right now. I've had enough. They threw us out of our home, and I need to deal with this tonight. I need them to leave." The police dismissed the call as a standard landlord-tenant dispute and did not intervene. Michael later described his turmoil, saying, "My paradise had turned into hell. I walked outside and circled the house all night. Without stopping, it was like that every day. I wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't eating." Lauren continued her online harassment, posting another message on social network filled with accusations and threats. On August 3, 2019, at 9:35 a.m., Michael contacted the police again, stating, "They're crazy, they're stalking us, and we're afraid for our lives." However, Lauren's father dismissed Michael's calls to the police as fabrications. It was later revealed that Lauren had filed a complaint with Safe Sport, an organization that investigates misconduct in sports. Accusing Michael and Mary of mistreating her, Lauren alleged that Michael had intimidated and verbally abused her, though she did not accuse him of physical violence. On August 7, 2019, a van arrived at Michael's home, and a woman stepped out. She turned out to be a social worker from the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. She approached Michael and asked, "I need to speak with Ms. Mary. Where can I find her?" Michael called Mary over. The social worker intended to check on Mary's children, but the children were not at home at the time. The barn staff reassured the social worker that the children were well cared for and treated kindly by Michael and Mary. Social worker confirmed that there were no social problems in their family. However, the implication of potential harm toward children deeply upset Michael. Feeling pushed to his limit, he decided to take decisive action. Inside his office, Michael opened a safe and took out a black and pink weapon. He left the house, got into his truck, and drove down the gravel road to the farm where the Lauren and Rob were staying. What happened next remains uncertain, but at 2:13 p.m. that day, Lauren called 911, struggling to breathe. She said, "I've been attacked in the heart. Michael Barrasone attacked me. Please help." While she was on the call, the sounds of a fight between Rob and Michael could be heard in the background. When the police arrived, they found Rob holding a badly beaten Michael down on the ground. Rob had the weapon in his possession. The officers immediately handcuffed Michael. Lauren was in critical condition. Lying on her back, pale and nearly gray, she was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. Doctors were uncertain if she had suffered brain damage. To stabilize her, Lauren was placed in a medically induced coma and connected to tubes supporting her body. Meanwhile, Michael was also hospitalized when he woke up in a hospital bed. He saw himself handcuffed to the bed rail. He claimed to have no memory of attack Lauren, as if his mind had been completely wiped the following day. Michael Barrassone was charged with attempted murder and faced the possibility of an 80-year prison sentence. Confused and furious, he couldn't understand how it had all happened. Lauren remained in a coma for 4 days, followed by 3 weeks in the intensive care unit, unable to speak due to being on a ventilator. She eventually recovered enough to talk to the police after being moved to a regular hospital room. Lauren explained that Michael had been hiding behind a bush near her back porch, unaware that he had a weapon. She approached him and started talking. Suddenly, Michael pulled out the weapon and attacked her twice. Rob was nearby, witnessed the attack. Rob stated that Michael also attacked at Rob, but missed after Rob hitting him on the head, a blow that was likely the cause of his memory loss. Rob stating, Lauren didn't have time to say anything to Michael before he pulled out the weapon. He wasn't there to talk, he was there to kill them. Meanwhile, Michael's defense argued that Lauren had deliberately driven him to a mental breakdown. Mary testified during the trial. Describing the summer of 2019 as a particularly difficult time, she said Michael was anxious, frightened, and frequently panicked. Michael spent over 2 years in prison until spring 2022. His high-profile trial eventually began and lasted nearly 3 weeks. During her testimony, Lauren was asked if she had ever planned to ruin Michael. She admitted, at some point, yes. Michael's defense team employed a rare strategy, arguing that he had temporarily become insane and was mentally unbalanced. The doctors asserted that Lauren gaslit him, manipulated his perception of reality, and drove him beyond his breaking point. However, Nagel, Lauren's attorney, suggesting that Michael's memory lapse was selective, affecting only the crime itself while leaving other memories intact. Final. The court found Michael Barrassone not guilty of committing a crime against Lauren Kanarek. The jury concluded that, at the time of the incident, Michael was not mentally stable. He was not held criminally liable for his actions on that day at the equestrian club. The judge declared Michael the true victim in the story. After the verdict, Michael burst into tears and collapsed into his lawyer's arms. His legal team rejoiced, calling it justice. Michael considers the day of the verdict the best day of his life. Reflecting afterward, Michael said, "I was lost. I'm like a rudderless ship. The world as I knew it is gone. So now I have to build a new world." Lauren's lawyer is determined to seek justice and refuses to give up. He firmly believes the court's decision is unreasonable and considers Michael a criminal who deserves the maximum penalty. Lauren's father also believes the jury was wrong and insists that Michael should be sentenced to life imprisonment. A few weeks after the verdict, Michael was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. After undergoing evaluation at the psychiatric hospital, Judge Stephen Taylor ruled that Michael should be moved to a less restrictive facility. His supporters remain hopeful that he will soon be allowed to return home. In November 2023, Michael was released, but still requires regular psychiatric treatment. Meanwhile, after enduring several rounds of surgeries and treatments, Lauren has returned to horseback riding. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Carla Faye Tucker. The events began on the morning of June 13, 1983, when the Texas Police Department responded to an urgent call from a man. Officers were dispatched to a house in the northeastern part of the city. Inside, they discovered the bodies of a man and a woman who had been brutally killed with a pickaxe. Initially, investigators suspected the murders were the result of a robbery gone wrong, but the sheer savagery of the crime made this theory unlikely. Once the victims' identities were confirmed and their backgrounds investigated, new revelations emerged that drastically changed the direction of the case. Houston, Texas, with a population of over 1 million, is the largest city in the region and the hub of Harris County. It is home to people of various religions and cultural backgrounds who live together in this diverse community. However, as the population grows, so does the crime rate. And Houston is now ranked among the top 100 most dangerous cities in America. On the morning of June 13, 1983, a man waited for his colleague, Jerry Lynn Dean, to pick him up for work. Jerry, however, never arrived. They had recently signed a contract for a security system installation job, and he knew Jerry was not the type to miss work without a good reason, since they lived close to each other. He decided to check on Jerry after waiting for some time, assuming his colleague might have overslept. When Gregory reached Jerry's apartment, he noticed the door was slightly open. He stepped inside and called out for Jerry, but received no response. He found the TV and the sound system were tangled together, and Jerry's motorcycle, which Jerry had been working on, was gone. Concerned, he began searching all over the apartment. Eventually, he opened the door to the guest bedroom. Little did he know that he was about to discover something horrifying. Jerry was found lying on the floor next to the bed, surrounded by a pool of blood. On the bed was a woman unfamiliar to he, with a pickaxe lodged in her chest. Horrified by the gruesome scene, he fled the apartment and went straight home to call the police. When the police arrived at the apartment, they observed that the space was in disarray, with tools, motorcycle parts, and dirty clothes scattered across the floor in the guest bedroom. They discovered the bodies of Jerry and the unknown woman. The officers documented the crime scene, including the pickaxe, which was identified as the murder weapon. One officer removed the pickaxe from the woman's chest and placed it aside for collection as evidence. The bodies were sent to the Harris County Medical Examiner's office for autopsy. During questioning, the colleague said to the investigators that the apartment door had been open when he arrived, and the interior looked as though someone had ransacked it. He also noticed that Jerry's motorcycle and blue Chevrolet El Camino pickup truck were missing. A search of the apartment revealed that both victims' wallets had also disappeared. Additionally, investigators discovered that the bird hammer used in the attack was taken from Jerry's toolkit. The detectives found no evidence of forced entry into the apartment. Neighbors mentioned hearing loud noises from the apartment early in the morning, but did not call the police, as they neither heard cries for help nor explosion and assumed nothing serious had occurred. Investigators theorized that the perpetrator was either someone the victims knew and willingly let in, or someone who entered through a door that was accidentally unlocked. Meanwhile, the severity of the attack pointed to the possibility of a premeditated murder. The autopsy revealed that Jerry sustained 28 pickaxe wounds, a head injury caused by a blunt object striking the back of his skull through fingerprints. The police identified Deborah Ruth Thornton as the second victim. She suffered 15 pickaxe wounds to her head and chest, with a fatal strike piercing her heart. After ruling out random theft, investigators turned their attention to the victim's close contacts. Jerry had met Deborah just the day before at a pool party. This was the first time they had met. Friends at the party stated that Deborah had attended to relax and escape her personal problems. Further inquiries revealed that Deborah was married and had 2 children. So, suspicion first fell on her husband. The husband was questioned and told investigators that on the evening of June 12, he had been at home with his children. He acknowledged that he and his wife had been having misunderstandings recently, but insisted he loved her and would never harm her. He claimed to know nothing about Deborah's infidelity and said he had never heard of a man named Jerry before. Investigators confirmed the husband's alibi and ruled him out as a suspect afterward. They learn of another person who may have held a grudge: Deborah's father, William. William had a criminal past, including a conviction for assault, for which he had served time. He currently owned a large business in Texas, but was under investigation for tax evasion. Further investigation revealed that Deborah had once been called to testify in court against her father, which could have provided a motive for murder. William was questioned, but he denied any involvement in the crime. Investigators kept him under surveillance for several weeks, but found no evidence connecting him to the double murder. Another team of investigators began looking into Jerry's past, uncovering that he, too, was surrounded by complex relationships. Jerry worked as a mechanic, and among those who knew him, a woman named Carla Faye Tucker. Carla, known for her love of partying, had a strained relationship with Jerry. The tension started when Carla first met Jerry, the boyfriend of Sean. From the start, she had a poor impression of him. She thought he was weak and unsuitable for her best friend. Their conflict escalated after an incident at Carla's apartment. Jerry had parked his motorcycle in her living room, and oil leaked from the bike, staining her carpet. Furious, Carla eventually kicked Jerry out of her apartment that night. In the months that followed, their animosity deepened. One day, when Carla and Sean planned a trip to see their favorite bands, Jerry became very upset. He found Carla's photo album and cut out all her pictures, including the only photo she had with her mother. This act infuriated Carla, and she tried to persuade Sean to end her relationship with Jerry. However, instead of separating, Sean and Jerry moved in together and got married. Despite everything, Carla remained convinced that her friend had made a mistake by choosing Jerry. A month after the wedding, Sean visited Carla's house to collect a jacket. During the visit, Carla mentioned that she no longer wanted to see Jerry. Upon hearing that Jerry had parked outside near her house, Carla stormed outside, confronted him, hit him in the face, and broke his glasses. This incident led to Jerry being taken to the hospital to remove glass fragments from his eye. In June of the same year, Sean and Jerry separated, citing accusations of domestic violence and clashing lifestyles. In retaliation for the alleged abuse she claimed to have suffered, Sean withdrew a large sum of money from Jerry's account and went shopping with Carla. After hearing this, Jerry allegedly began plotting his revenge. Rumors circulated that he had hired someone to attack Carla, intending to disfigure her. Their volatile relationship quickly attracted the attention of investigators. Carla was born on November 18, 1959, in Houston, Texas. To Larry and Carolyn, she had two much older sisters who were said to have negatively influenced her. This influence contributed to Carla starting to smoke at just 8 years old. When she was 10, her parents divorced, and she discovered that Larry was not her biological father. By the age of 12, Carla had begun use with banned substance and lived loosely with men. At 14, she dropped out of school and, following her mother's example, started working as an escort. Carolyn even taught Carla how to use her body to earn money. Around this time, Carla's sister introduced her to men who frequented biker clubs. Carla and her mother also became passionate fans of rock music and began traveling with music groups, embracing a carefree and unconventional lifestyle. Carla adapted quickly to this new way of living. At 16, she met Stephen Griffith, a laborer, and the two planned to marry. However, Carla found married life overwhelming. They frequently argued, and their fights often turned physical. Stephen even told his friends that Carla could hit harder than any man he knew. After 2 years of constant conflict, they decided to separate, and Carla returned to her previous lifestyle. When Carla was 20, Carolyn passed away. By that time, Carla had returned to spending time in biker clubs. It was during this period that she became close friends with Sean Dean. Their bond grew strong. The detectives questioned Carla. She admitted to having disagreements with Jerry, but denied any involvement in the crime. Carla allowed the police to take her fingerprints and initially agreed to a polygraph test, but later refused it after her boyfriend advised against it. The fingerprints provided no useful leads, as experts couldn't find viable evidence at the crime scene or on the murder weapon. However, Carla's sudden refusal to take a lie detector test made the detectives even more suspicious of her. Even so, this was not enough to add Carla or Sean to the list of suspects. Detectives continued visiting them regularly, hoping one of them would slip up. Carla appeared completely unbothered and carried on with her life, attending parties as usual. Weeks passed, and detectives still could not find any evidence linking of them. A detective from the homicide department took an interest in the case after hearing the name Daniel Ryan Garrett. Carla's boyfriend, the detective, had grown up in the same neighborhood as Daniel and also acquainted with Daniel's ex-wife. The detective contacted Daniel's ex-wife and asked if she had any information about Daniel or Carla's potential involvement in the Houston double murder. She confessed that she had not seen her ex-husband for a long time and expressed a desire to talk to him about it. On July 18, 1983, the Houston Police Department received an urgent call, judging by the voice on the other end of the line. The caller sounded extremely nervous. He demanded to speak specifically to this detective. It was Daniel's brother, and he claimed to have information about the murder. Daniel's brother confessed that he had kept this information a secret for 5 weeks. He also mentioned a third individual, James Leibrandt, a friend of his, who was present at Jerry's house on the night of the incident. He warned that the situation was escalating because Carla had been talking about killing one of the witnesses to silence them during his interrogation. He said that early in the morning of June 13, Daniel and Carla arrived at his house in a blue pickup truck. Carla bragged that she had taken care of Jerry and an unidentified woman, and both of them asked him to help destroy the evidence. Initially, he hesitated to get involved, but ultimately decided to assist. He burned Jerry's wallet in an ashtray, and the stolen motorcycle parts were dumped into a nearby ditch. On July 20, 1983, Daniel's brother rode a motorcycle to Carla's house with a transmitter hidden under his shirt and a recorder concealed in his shoe. The detective and the investigative team listened from a surveillance van parked a block away. Daniel's brother casually started the conversation, carefully guiding it toward the topic of the killing. Ultimately, the suspect, Carla, provided a detailed account of what happened on the night of June 12. Carla had organized a birthday party for her sister. The celebration lasted the entire weekend, with friends coming and going, drinking alcohol, and using banned substance, which were plentiful in the house by Sunday evening, when only James, Daniel, and Carla remained. She told Daniel that she felt overwhelmed with emotions and energy. The three of them began discussing a planned crime, and Carla suggested stealing Jerry's motorbike and selling it for parts to make money. She expressed her deep hatred for Jerry and said she wanted to make him pay for everything he had done to her and Sean. Around 3 a.m., they went to Jerry's house. They entered without any trouble because Carla had stolen an extra set of keys several weeks earlier. At the time, she didn't know why she had taken the keys, but they ended up being crucial on the night of the murder. During a recorded conversation, Daniel's brother asked if they had planned to kill anyone when they entered the house. Carla replied no, explaining that everything had happened spontaneously at the time. Carla was intoxicated and under the influence of banned substance. She sat on top of Jerry as he woke up. Trying to restrain him, Jerry attempted to free himself by grabbing her hands, but at that moment, Daniel struck him multiple times in the head with a hammer while in her drunken and drugged state. Carla became irritated by the gurgling sounds Jerry, who was dying, was making in a fit of rage. She grabbed a pickaxe and struck his body with it. Carla later admitted that using the flat side of the pickaxe gave her a feeling of arousal. Daniel struck the final, deadly blow to Jerry's head with the hammer and then left the room. At that moment, Carla noticed a woman hidden under a blanket in the corner of the bed. Up to that point, she had been so focused on Jerry that she hadn't realized someone else was there. Carla and the woman began to struggle. Their fight continued until Daniel returned, overcome by rage. Carla attacked the woman repeatedly with the pickaxe, eventually driving it straight into her heart. Daniel was arrested just a block from his home while heading to work. At the same time, armed police officers entered Carla's house to take her into custody. James Leibrandt, who was visiting Carla as a guest, was also arrested at the police station. All of Carla's friends were questioned. They shared what they knew, providing consistent accounts, and all noted that Carla had always disliked Jerry. However, both Carla and Daniel remained silent during questioning. Carla claimed she had been drugged and could not remember anything about that night during the investigation. Leibrandt cooperated with authorities and testified against Carla and Daniel. He claimed that after using the banned substance, he felt restless and needed something to relieve himself, leading to his involvement in the theft scheme, ultimately resulted in Leibrandt receiving a light sentence. Carla and Daniel were charged with the murders of Jerry and Deborah. Both were held in Harris County Jail without bail. In September 1983, they appeared in court, but their trials were held separately. Carla faced charges for both murders, while Daniel, after testifying at a hearing, had the charge for Deborah's murder dropped. Carla pleaded not guilty and remained in jail, awaiting her trial. During her detention, jail staff reported that Carla behaved defiantly and provocatively. Everything changed, however, while awaiting trial. She began to recover from the effects of alcohol and banned substance. She started reading books from the prison library and, for the first time in her life, picked up a Bible. Later, Carla admitted to her cellmates and the staff that it was during this time she began to understand the consequences of her actions. She started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where she met others whose lives had been destroyed by these toxic things. Inspired by their stories, Carla created her own Bible study group and resolved to become a better person. When Carla repented, she realized that the Lord forgives those who are lost. She came to believe that holding on to guilt and failing to seek forgiveness blocks one's connection to God and fills life with bitterness. Feeling forgiven by the Lord, Carla's heart became filled with love, which she believed should guide her life. In 1984, Carla stood trial for the murder of Jerry and Deborah. She explained that, at the time of the crime, she was heavily under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Carla said that the murder was not planned, but occurred as a sudden outburst of anger during a robbery. Fueled by the substances she had consumed, several witnesses for the defense supported her lawyers, arguing that Carla and Daniel, on that night, were unable to distinguish right from wrong. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on her guilt. Carla was given the chance to testify on her own behalf before the judge made the final decision. She spoke for nearly 5 hours, sharing details about her past and stating that only after being imprisoned did she fully understand her actions. Despite her emotional testimony, Carla was ultimately sentenced to death by lethal injection, becoming the only woman in Texas to receive this punishment. In November 1984, Carla testified at Daniel's trial, hoping he would not be convicted. However, he was also sentenced to death. That marked the last time Carla and Daniel saw each other, while the legal system labeled Carla a murderer. Many saw her as a symbol of reform, initially resigned to her fate of dying by lethal injection. Carla's outlook changed in 1993 when she learned that Daniel, who was awaiting execution, had died of liver disease. This motivated her to fight for her own life with the support of a prison chaplain. She began the process of appealing her case. Carla appealed to have her death sentence reduced to life imprisonment. Her request gained support from notable figures, including Pope John Paul II, the Prime Minister of Italy, Romano Prodi, U.S. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, and televangelist Pat Robertson. Surprisingly, Ronald Carlson, the brother of the victims, Deborah, also supported clemency after witnessing Carla's transformation during her time in prison. Even Hans, the warden of the Huntsville's prison, testified that Carla had been an exemplary inmate. The decision now rested with the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, which was responsible for recommending whether her death sentence should be commuted. However, the final authority belonged to Governor Texas George W. Bush. On January 28, 1998, the board rejected Carla's request. In response, she wrote a letter to Governor Bush, acknowledging her actions as acts of extreme cruelty and recounting her journey of transformation. Despite her plea, the governor denied her final appeal just hours before her execution, refusing to commute her death sentence to life imprisonment. On February 2, 1998, Carla requested a peach, a banana, and a salad, with dressing as her last meal, according to prison authorities. She spent the morning with her family from 8 a.m. to noon, while many hoped her final hours would remain peaceful. Others anticipated that the day would be emotionally difficult for all involved until the very end. People awaited the governor's decision. Would he grant her mercy? On February 3, 1998, Carla Tucker was executed by lethal injection in Texas. She had requested the presence of her sister, Kari Weeks, and some friends during her final moments at 6:45 p.m., 8 minutes after the injection. She was pronounced dead. Carla was the first woman to be executed in Texas in 135 years since the reinstatement of the death penalty. Carla was buried at Forest Park, Lawndale Cemetery in Houston later. Accusations arose against Governor Bush, alleging that he lacked compassion for Carla during the appeals process. In response, Bush issued a statement expressing that he had forgiven her, but emphasized that justice still needed to be served for the 2 lives she had taken. Carla inspired the creation of several fictional characters in stories that explored her troubled upbringing and how it eventually led to her crimes. Fred Allen, the execution team's captain, revealed that overseeing Carla's execution caused him deep emotional turmoil. He later resigned from his role in the Texas prison system and became a vocal critic of the death penalty. Allen argued that no one has the moral right to take another person's life, even if it is sanctioned by the law. He also shared that when Carla was brought in, he realized she was the first woman scheduled for execution, and he vividly remembered the details of that day. Carla looked at him and said, "Thank you, Allen, for everything you are doing." Allen replied, "You're welcome," and fastened the safety strap. Other members of the team carried out the necessary procedures, and everything proceeded as expected. When Carla was pronounced dead, Allen and the others placed her body on the stretcher, removed the straps, and went about their usual tasks. However, shortly afterward, Allen suddenly imagined the pain Carla must have felt. He broke into a cold sweat, began trembling, and burst into tears. It was a deeply shocking experience for him. The changes Carla underwent in prison profoundly affected many who had initially seen her as nothing more than an antisocial individual. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States. His father, chemist Lionel Herbert Dahmer, and his mother, Joyce Annette Dahmer, faced various challenges. Joyce struggled with depression and possibly other mental health issues, which required her to take large amounts of medication, even during her pregnancy. Despite these difficulties, their first child, Jeffrey, was born healthy and displayed a cheerful and curious personality in his early years. However, when he was about 5 years old, he developed a double inguinal hernia and required surgery. Initially, Jeffrey was described as an active and cheerful child, but after the surgery, his parents observed a change in his demeanor. He seemed more withdrawn and showed signs of depression. One day, Jeffrey witnessed his father taking an animal carcass from under the house and placing it on a tray. The sight caught Jeffrey's attention, and he became curious. Without hesitation, he began playing with it. His father, Lionel, whose job and academic career required him to move several times, eventually earned a doctorate in chemistry. This achievement led Jeffrey's family to settle in Bath, Ohio, where they found a large plot of land surrounded by trees. After moving to Ohio, Jeffrey began to avoid social interaction, preferring solitude. However, he cherished the time he spent with his father, participating in various activities together, such as fishing. Jeffrey enjoyed watching his father prepare fish and was curious about what was inside them. Lionel noticed this passion in his son and suggested that he learn taxidermy. Although Jeffrey did not experience physical abuse at home, he grew up in a tense atmosphere. His parents, Lionel and Joyce, argued frequently. Lionel often criticized Joyce for not taking good care of their son, while Joyce expressed frustration with Lionel's long hours at work and school, feeling that he was neglecting the family. Over time, they realized that Jeffrey was quite withdrawn and had difficulty connecting with others. When Jeffrey was 7, he got his first pet, a dog. This brought him immense joy, and he took great care of the dog, even bringing it along when he explored the area for animal carcasses. At the same time, Joyce became pregnant with their second child. To help Jeffrey feel included, his parents allowed him to choose a name for his younger brother, which he decided would be David. Jeffrey attended primary school in Bath, where his father made efforts to encourage him to socialize with other children. Although these efforts were largely unsuccessful, on weekends, Lionel spent time with Jeffrey, tending to the garden and bees together, and attending local fairs. Their relationship was strong, and Jeffrey even wrote poems for his father during this time. His mother, Joyce, was hospitalized for depression and anxiety, which was a difficult period for the family. When Jeffrey entered secondary school, he continued to enjoy dissecting animals and began to explore his abuse. During this time, he kissed a boy from the neighborhood, which led him to realize that he was attracted to boys. Although he struggled to accept this part of himself, Jeffrey faced increasing anxiety due to his father Lionel's homophobic views. Throughout high school, he endured bullying. To cope with the challenges around him, he turned to alcohol. This dependence on alcohol led him to come to school drunk and even drink during class. As a result, he was often reprimanded and disciplined. His behavior varied greatly. Sometimes he was the center of attention, while at other times he was very shy in school. Jeffrey often engaged in behavior that was considered humorous or eccentric. He acted as the class clown, frequently imitating epileptic seizures and making sheep noises during class. As he grew older, he even began drawing chalk sketches of human bodies on the classroom floor. Around the age of 14 or 15, Jeffrey began to experience disturbing obsessive thoughts related to sex. This struggle intensified over time, leading him to develop various fantasies. However, unlike typical teenage fantasies, Jeffrey's were more disturbing. Jeffrey found his senior year of high school particularly challenging. Because his parents decided to get a divorce, Lionel moved away and took refuge in a hotel, while Jeffrey's mother also decided to leave home, taking her youngest son, David, with her and leaving Jeffrey alone. Just a few weeks after graduating, he began to explore his fantasies more freely. Jeffrey's fantasies began to take shape in a disturbing way. He often thought about a young man he had met while playing sports on his way home. This man frequently jogged in the evenings, shirtless, and Jeffrey found himself drawn to him. Jeffrey then imagined a scenario where he would hide in the bushes, and when the man passed by, Jeffrey would attack him and take him home. However, on the day, Jeffrey decided to make this fantasy a reality. The young man did not show up for his usual jog. Another fantasy that Jeffrey cherished was picking up a hitchhiker and taking him home. In this scenario, they would share an intimate moment and eventually live together in harmony. This fantasy became a reality in 1978 when Jeffrey was driving down the road and spotted a young hitchhiker who fit his ideal type. Jeffrey stopped and offered the young man a ride in his car. The young man, eager to go to the summer music festival, accepted Jeffrey's invitation to have a beer at his house first. His name was Stephen Hicks, and he had just turned 18. They returned to Jeffrey's house together after drinking a few beers. Stephen asked Jeffrey to fulfill his promise to take him to the festival. Jeffrey hesitated, and an argument ensued. Eventually, Stephen decided to leave, which escalated the situation in a fit of rage. Jeffrey hit Stephen with a dumbbell, causing him to fall to the floor, unconscious. In a panic, Jeffrey strangled Stephen until he stopped breathing. Jeffrey then processed Stephen's body, placing it in 5 black trash bags. He loaded the bags into his car and drove off to find a place to dispose of them. Jeffrey began to drive erratically and out of his lane. The patrolman saw Jeffrey and asked him why he was driving like that. Jeffrey confided in the officer about his struggles with insomnia and his parents' recent divorce. Expressing feelings of hopelessness about his life, he remained polite and calm throughout the conversation. When the officer asked about the car, he explained that it was full of trash and that he was looking for a place to properly dispose of it. Jeffrey made a good impression on the officer, who asked him to return home. Jeffrey complied and returned to his house with the trash bags containing Stephen's body. He eventually hid the bags in the basement. The next day, he continued to process Stephen's body. Attempting to crush the bones, he then scattered them in various locations behind the house in the days that followed. Jeffrey paid attention to newspapers and news reports, hoping to find any updates on the missing man. However, he found none. He had committed a serious crime, but it was still a secret. This prompted him to repeat his crime. A week after Jeffrey's mother, Joyce, left home, Lionel found his son living alone and increasingly anxious. He encouraged Jeffrey to find a job, but Jeffrey showed little interest instead. He spent his days drinking. To help, Lionel took him to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and arranged sessions with psychologists. Lionel encouraged Jeffrey to pursue his studies at Ohio University. Although Jeffrey did not outright refuse, he continued to drink and think about Stephen's murder. In the following months, he donated blood in exchange for money to buy alcohol. By the end of the semester, his academic difficulties led to his expulsion from the university. However, Lionel was determined and convinced Jeffrey to enlist. Believing that military discipline could have a positive impact on him, Jeffrey complied and successfully passed the selection process. His passion for medical care took him to San Antonio, Texas, where he trained to become a military medic. Allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of human anatomy, Jeffrey eventually found his passion in his work. After 6 months, he had changed dramatically. Military physical training not only improved his physique, but also made him more sociable. For the first time, Lionel witnessed his son smile, although not while on leave. After completing his training, Jeffrey was deployed to a base in Germany. Unfortunately, his struggles with alcohol were not resolved, and when the authorities learned of the problem, he was discharged from the military upon returning to the United States. Jeffrey chose to distance himself from his father instead of going home. He settled in Miami, where he rented a hotel room and found work at a diner. At first, his life seemed okay, but it quickly became unstable. Jeffrey drank more and soon found himself unable to afford a hotel room, forcing him to sleep on the beach. Realizing that he could not continue like this, he decided to ask his father for financial help. Lionel, understanding that giving his son money might cause him to drink more, Lionel bought Jeffrey a ticket home instead, determined not to give up. Lionel committed to helping his son find a better path forward. Lionel picked Jeffrey up from the airport. Jeffrey greeted him with a bright smile, which initially led Lionel to believe that his son was simply happy to see him. However, it soon became clear that Jeffrey had consumed a significant amount of alcohol before the flight. Faced with this reality, Lionel decided that the best course of action would be to send Jeffrey to live with his grandmother in Milwaukee. During his time with her, Jeffrey matured considerably. He developed a deep respect for his grandmother, who, by many accounts, was the only person he felt truly close to. Jeffrey helped her with various chores around the house and even attended church with her during the first few weeks. Jeffrey began reading the Bible, which helped him alleviate some of his negative thoughts. However, he still struggled with his fantasies. One day, he stole a male mannequin from a clothing store and hid it in his closet. He saw the mannequin as the perfect companion because it never rejected him, made no demands, and inspired him. However, one day, his grandmother discovered the mannequin and was horrified. She insisted that Jeffrey leave the house, but he calmed her down by promising to get rid of it one day. While sitting in the library, a man approached Jeffrey and handed him a note instructing him to meet in the men's room. Although Jeffrey chose not to accept the invitation, the incident sparked something within him, and after 9 years, His repressed desires resurfaced in 1985. Jeffrey frequented the sauna, looking for men to satisfy his desires. When he found someone who interested him, he would invite them out for a drink. However, he would secretly put sleeping pills in their drinks. When the victim passed out, Jeffrey would lie down next to them. After one of his victims was poisoned and hospitalized, Jeffrey was banned from the club he frequented. Despite this, he continued to seek abuse partners in other bars and clubs. He preferred muscular young men and did not care about their skin color or hair color. In November 1987, Jeffrey met a man named Stephen Tuomi, a dancer and waiter from Michigan. They fell in love and decided to spend some time alone together. They rented a room at the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Jeffrey offered Stephen a cocktail that had been spiked with sleeping pills. When Jeffrey woke up the next morning, he found bruises on Stephen Tuomi's forearms and chest, along with blood coming from his mouth. Jeffrey did not remember killing Stephen and could not believe it had happened. However, he was in the same room as the corpse, which prompted him to quickly leave the hotel, cross the street, and buy a suitcase. He returned to the hotel, placed Stephen's body in the suitcase, paid the bill in the lobby, and called a taxi. A hotel employee helped Jeffrey carry the suitcase, which was so heavy that the employee jokingly asked if there was a body inside. Jeffrey replied, "Yes," and they both laughed. Unaware that the employee was helping to dispose of a body, Jeffrey then went to his grandmother's house with the suitcase and secretly took it to the basement. He began to process Stephen Tuomi's body. He placed it in trash bags and then moved the bags containing the body into the trash. Several months later, Stephen Tuomi's relatives filed a missing persons report after he was last seen the night he met Jeffrey while working as a waiter, although police initially believed that Stephen had simply left. His family did not accept this explanation. They had been unable to contact him, and his belongings were still in his house. However, the investigation stalled, and there was no explanation for Stephen Tuomi's disappearance. After not being held accountable for his actions, Jeffrey increasingly embraced his dark desires and became a serial killer. Over the next 5 years, he committed multiple murders on his free nights and weekends. After 3 months of searching for new victims, Jeffrey met a 14-year-old boy at a bus stop near a club. Jeffrey approached the boy and offered to pay him $50 to sleep with him, and unfortunately, the boy accepted the offer. They took the bus to Jeffrey's grandmother's house, where she was sleeping. While they went down to the basement, there, Jeffrey drugged the boy and then strangled him. He became more perverted, abusing the boy while he was dead. As the body began to decompose, Jeffrey treated it like those of his previous victims. He began to dispose of the body of James Dox Tater. He packed the body in plastic bags and threw it in the trash. The victim's name was James Dox Tater, according to the Tampa Bay Times. James had run away from home 2 days earlier to escape his abusive stepfather, although his mother filed a complaint. Police showed little interest in finding him. Jeffrey's fourth victim was Richard Guerrero, a 22-year-old Hispanic man. They met outside a gay bar called Phoenix. Jeffrey lured Richard to his grandmother's house, promising to pay him to spend the night in the basement. Jeffrey drugged Richard with sleeping pills, then strangled him with a leather strap and began abusing him after he was dead. After satisfying his desires, Jeffrey put the body parts in garbage bags, which were picked up by a garbage service the next day. Richard's family urged the police to investigate his disappearance, but the officers believed he had left home voluntarily. However, Richard's sister believed otherwise and convinced her relatives to hire a private investigator. Richard's father, who worked at a golf course, spent all his savings on the investigator. But it turned out that the investigator was a fraud. Meanwhile, Richard's mother prayed daily for his safe return. Jeffrey's grandmother asked him to move out because she was fed up with him. He was no longer the grandson she used to go to church with. His drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and the stench from the basement and garage were too much for her to bear. As a result, Jeffrey had to find a new place to live. He rented a small apartment where he stayed for a while as he prepared for his next victim, Jeffrey then found his fifth potential victim, a 13-year-old boy who came to his apartment. They met on the street, where Jeffrey offered to pay the boy in exchange for allowing him to take pictures. However, when Jeffrey tried to touch the boy got scared and ran away. The 13-year-old then informed his parents about the incident, and they reported it to the police. As a result, Jeffrey was arrested and charged with harassment. He received a 1-year sentence at the Milwaukee Correctional Center. Although he was allowed to leave during the day to go to work, he was required to return to the facility at night just days before his sentence began. Jeffrey met his sixth victim, a 24-year-old man named Anthony Sears. On March 25, 1989, Jeffrey and Anthony met at a bar, and when the bar closed, they decided to spend the night together. They could not go to Anthony's house because his girlfriend was there. Jeffrey asked a friend to drive them to his grandmother's house. When they arrived, he took Anthony to the basement and committed his usual act. However, this time was different. After disposing of the body, he put it in several different garbage bags. Some of Anthony's remains he threw in the trash, while others he kept in his locker at work. During Jeffrey's trial, his lawyer successfully reduced his sentence to just 10 months in a rehabilitation center. Jeffrey's father wrote to the judge, asking that Jeffrey be allowed to attend an alcohol treatment program while incarcerated. However, the judge received the letter too late, and Jeffrey was released without undergoing any rehabilitation. After his release, Jeffrey upgraded the security in his apartment by installing cameras and an alarm system. On June 24, 1990, Jeffrey went on a killing spree while at one of his favorite bars. He noticed a man named Raymond Smith. Jeffrey drugged Raymond and abused him before killing him. Just a month after killing Raymond, Jeffrey targeted another victim, 27-year-old Edward Smith. Edward was lured in with an offer of $100 to have his picture taken. With Jeffrey pretending to be a photographer, Edward was last seen alive talking to Jeffrey at a club. In September 1990, Jeffrey murdered his eighth victim, 22-year-old Ernest Miller. Ernest was attractive and healthy, and he worked as a dancer. He agreed to pose for photos in Jeffrey's apartment for $50, which put him in a dangerous situation. Jeffrey followed his usual pattern, plied Ernest with a mixture of alcohol and strong drugs. And this time, however, Ernest woke up before Jeffrey could strangle him. Resulting in a struggle, Jeffrey attacked Ernest with a knife. After killing him, Jeffrey disposed of the body as he had done with his other victims. But this time, he took a more disturbing step. Not only did he handling of the body, he also put it in the freezer for later use. The foul smell emanating from Jeffrey's apartment caused complaints from neighbors. To explain the smell, Jeffrey claimed that his meat refrigerator had broken down. To solve the problem, he bought a large plastic barrel and filled it with acid to destroy the body parts. Although he was able to remove some of the evidence, the smell remained. It seemed that Jeffrey did not care about the complaints from the neighbors. On September 24, 1990, Jeffrey continued his killing spree, targeting David Thomas, a 22-year-old man whom he had met at the Grand Avenue Mall. Jeffrey convinced David to return to his apartment for a few drinks, offering additional money if he posed for a photo. After giving David a drink laced with sedatives, Jeffrey found himself not attracted to him, but was afraid David would be angry when he found out he was drugged. As a result, Jeffrey strangled him. He took photos of handling of the body disposal and kept those photos for unknown reasons. Jeffrey stopped killing for 4 months. He met his next victim in February 1991. This victim, his 10th, was 17-year-old Curtis Straughter. Curtis had just lost his job as a nurse and was looking forward to becoming a model and attending college. They met at a bus stop, tragically. This was not the end of Jeffrey's list of victims. Just 2 months later, he met Errol Lindsay, a 19-year-old boy who was also lured by the promise of money to take pictures. The next victim was 31-year-old Tony Hughes. Tony, who had lost his hearing as a child due to medication, was cheerful and sociable. He loved to dance and made friends easily. Tony was last seen on May 24, 1991, at a club. That night, Jeffrey invited him to his house, where he continued his killing spree. Unfortunately, Tony's body was left in Jeffrey's apartment for several days before being dumped in a dumpster on May 26, 1991. A tragic chapter unfolded when Jeffrey met Conorak Synthesophone, a 14-year-old Laotian teenager. Conorak was the younger brother of a previous victim who had escaped from Jeffrey. The situation was heartbreaking. Conorak had accepted money from Jeffrey to help his family, who was struggling financially and faced challenges due to their limited English skills. Conorak had been drugged by Jeffrey. After ensuring that Conorak was unconscious, Jeffrey left to buy alcohol, planning to strangle him upon his return. However, Conorak regained consciousness and escaped from the apartment. He wandered the streets until he encountered two girls, who were the nieces of Jeffrey Dahmer's next-door neighbor. The girls saw Conorak, who was injured, and they called 911 for help. The police, along with paramedics, rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they found Conorak lying in the middle of the road. They picked him up and placed him in a nearby building. When they began asking him questions, Jeffrey turned around, claiming that Conorak was his boyfriend, with whom he had just had a fight, and that he had been drinking heavily. The police accepted Jeffrey's explanation. The two girls begged the police to check Jeffrey's identification, but they refused. They urged the officers to listen to them. Pointing out the bruises and cuts on Conorak's body, the girls insisted that they knew the boy and that he was definitely a minor. The officers rudely told the girls to be quiet and even threatened to arrest them for trying to help Conorak. Had the officers checked Jeffrey's identification, they would have discovered that he was on mandatory parole for a previous conviction for molesting Conorak's brother. Instead, both officers assisted Jeffrey in taking Conorak back to his apartment, and one officer even placed him on the sofa. Once inside the apartment, the officers detected a foul odor, which Jeffrey explained was from a broken refrigerator filled with rotting meat that he had not disposed of. Surprisingly, the officers did not find anything suspicious. Jeffrey even showed them pictures of Conorak that he had taken earlier. Another alarming detail that the police overlooked was the body of Tony Hughes in the bedroom. The police left the scene, but the two girls called them back to check if they needed to identify themselves as witnesses. Unfortunately, the police dismissed their concerns, claiming it was just a disagreement between two adult partners. When Jeffrey was left alone with Conorak, he decided to inject hydrochloric acid into the boy's head. He did this to create a zombie. He had always dreamed of having a companion who would obey his every command without question. These experiments ultimately led to Conorak's death. Jeffrey then handling of the body. Conorak's, the next victim added to Jeffrey's list, was 20-year-old Matt Turner, whom he met at a bus stop. Matt accepted Jeffrey's offer to travel to Milwaukee for a professional photo shoot at his apartment. Jeffrey drugged, strangled, and handling of the body Matt's. On July 5, 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger became Jeffrey's victim. They met at a bar in Chicago, and Jeremiah went to Jeffrey's apartment with the promise of spending the weekend with him. Jeffrey then drugged Jeremiah and injected boiling water into his skull twice, causing him to fall into a coma and die 2 days later. Oliver Lacey, a 23-year-old athlete, accepted an offer for a photo shoot for money and accompanied Jeffrey to his apartment. There, Lacey and Jeffrey engage in intimate activities. Just 4 days later, on July 19, Jeffrey lured 25-year-old Joseph Bradehoff to his apartment. Joseph was strangled and laid out on Jeffrey's bed, covered with a sheet. For 2 days, on July 21, Jeffrey began handling of the body Joseph's. On July 22, 1991, Jeffrey approached a group of 3 friends at a bar while they were drinking. He introduced himself as a photographer and paid $100 to anyone to pose for photos. Only one, a 32-year-old homeless man named Tracy Edwards, agreed. Jeffrey invited Tracy to his apartment and mixed him a cocktail. which he offered to all of his victims. However, Tracy, being as smart as he was, noticed a strange taste in the drink and decided not to finish it. Jeffrey then attempted to be intimate with Tracy, but Tracy repeatedly refused. Eventually, Jeffrey handcuffed one of Tracy's hands, leading to a struggle. During the fight, Jeffrey grabbed a knife, but Tracy fought back, hit Jeffrey, and escaped from the apartment. On the street, Tracy spotted a police car and informed the officers about the incident. They accompanied him to Jeffrey's apartment. Jeffrey tried to prevent the police from searching his place, but it was extremely dirty, and a strong stench filled the air. While going through boxes in Jeffrey's apartment, the police discovered gruesome photos of his victims. It was clear that they were dealing with a serial killer. This was the beginning of the end for Jeffrey Dahmer. The police searched the apartment and arrested Jeffrey. Inside the refrigerator, they discovered numerous human body parts. In a container filled with acid, they found more human body parts. They also found photographs that not only revealed the bodies of the victims, but also documented the many abuses Jeffrey had committed against them. Jeffrey felt relieved that he no longer had to hide such a secret that he had kept for so many years. When he realized that he would have to face the consequences of his actions, he chose to confess everything. His confession took 6 weeks to complete and spanned 159 pages, detailing every aspect of his crimes, from his first murder to his last victim. Jeffrey explained that at first, he just wanted to lie next to the men he had kidnapped. But over time, his desires became increasingly horrific. He admitted that the only way to keep his victims with him forever was to kill them. Jeffrey Dahmer claimed that he did not want to kill. Instead, he wanted a zombie-like companion that he could control indefinitely. Psychologists who worked with Jeffrey concluded that his motive was not abuse, but a desire for control. After Jeffrey's detailed confession, the court no longer had to prove his guilt. It only needed to determine his sanity. At the time, Wisconsin did not have the death penalty. If he were found insane, he would have been committed to a mental hospital indefinitely. Although there was a possibility that he could be released in the future, the trial began on January 30, 1992, due to the serious nature of the case. Many security measures were taken in the courtroom, including the installation of bulletproof glass throughout the 2-week trial. Jeffrey sat silently, listening to arguments from both the prosecution and the defense. Jeffrey's defense strategy was simple. They did not try to argue that he was not guilty of murder. Instead, the defense sought to have him hospitalized for treatment. They argued that he needed psychological and psychiatric help, asserting that normal people do not commit such heinous acts. The prosecution, in contrast, argued that, under Wisconsin law, a person who remembers his actions and understands what they have done should be considered sane. A few days later, a verdict was reached. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional life sentence for a 1978 murder, bringing the total to 16 life sentences. Jeffrey expressed deep remorse for the pain he had caused the families of his victims and acknowledged their anger toward him. He was then sent to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. During his time in prison, Jeffrey rediscovered his faith in God. Recalling the times he had gone to church with his grandmother, he asked a local priest to baptize him, and the priest agreed. On July 3, 1994, a fellow inmate, Osvaldo DeRuthi, attacked Jeffrey, who was hospitalized but survived then. In November of that year, another inmate, Christopher Scarver, who was also serving a life sentence, attacked him. Christopher had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Christopher disliked Jeffrey, who described himself as religious, a characterization that Christopher found insincere. In November, Christopher, Jeffrey, and another inmate, Jesse Anderson, who was serving time for murdering his wife, cleaned the inmate gym. They were also required to clean the locker room and restrooms used after gym class when they were left unsupervised. Christopher seized the opportunity to carry out his dangerous plan to attack both Jeffrey and Jesse. First, he followed Jeffrey into the locker room. Where Jeffrey was cleaning, he took a steel bar from the weight room and struck Jeffrey in the head several times. He then attacked Jesse in the same manner. Afterward, he left the gym and called security. Both Jeffrey and Jesse were taken to the hospital, but Jeffrey died en route. His death was confirmed upon arrival at the hospital. Jesse remained in a coma for 2 days before being taken off life support. In accordance with Jeffrey's wishes, his body was cremated, and his ashes were divided among his parents. When details of Jeffrey's crimes became public, protests erupted, focused on the fact that 2 police officers who handed over a boy named Konarak Synthesomphone to Jeffrey were not prosecuted. The 2 police officers did not check the identity of the boy or Jeffrey and did not search Jeffrey's apartment. After the trial, the 2 police officers involved were suspended from duty. They later appealed the dismissal, and the judge ruled in their favor, and awarding each $55 in compensation after being reinstated. Both officers resumed their careers. Additionally, after the investigation was completed, the building where Jeffrey Dahmer lived was demolished in the hope of helping people forget the horrific events that occurred there. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sherry Daly. Sherry Daly grew up in Ventura, California, in a loving and supportive family, known for her friendly attitude and positive outlook. She quickly became one of the most popular girls in school. In her senior year, she began dating Michael Daly, who was admired by many. Their relationship developed quickly, and the couple even decided to get married after graduation. Despite their many positive qualities, Michael was outgoing and sociable, while Sherry was an introverted and reserved young woman who displayed a calm demeanor. In contrast to her boyfriend's lively personality, Michael's personality did not fit in with Sherry's family. However, despite their obvious differences, the couple found a harmonious balance in their relationship. Sherry became more outgoing in social situations, while Michael adopted a calmer approach. Initially, their relationship faced significant opposition from their families, but Sherry was determined to pursue it, and her parents eventually relented. Their doubts were dispelled. When Sherry and Michael introduced each other to their families, Michael gradually won over Sherry's relatives, and seeing Sherry's joy reassured her parents of his good intentions. He showed his charm and made a positive impression. Appearing both intelligent and trustworthy, Michael's serious demeanor charmed Sherry, and her family supported her choice. After graduating from high school, the young couple started their lives together, both working at a local grocery store. However, for Sherry, this was not her ultimate aspiration. She dreamed of saving enough money to open a daycare at home, a goal that aligned with her interest in children. The couple married in 1982 when Sherry was 21, and by the age of 24, she had welcomed 2 sons. Just a year apart, motherhood brought her joy, and her daily routine revolved around taking her sons to school and daycare. Sherry not only took her sons to school, but also cared for several children in the neighborhood, further expanding her nurturing role. Gradually, she was able to quit her grocery store job and devote herself to childcare full-time. This allowed her to fulfill one of her long-cherished dreams of caring for children in her own home. To accommodate her growing responsibilities, she purchased a van, affectionately known to her friends as the local school bus. It seemed like the family had everything they could wish for, and there were no signs of challenges to come. On May 6, 1996, Sherry was scheduled, as usual, to pick up the students and take them home. When her husband returned home, he began receiving calls from worried parents inquiring about Sherry's absence. They were confused, as she had not arrived to pick up the children after school. Michael soon received a call from the school, confirming that his 2 sons had not been picked up either. Prompted by the situation, Michael went to the school, where he learned that Sherry had only been there that morning. Concerned for her safety, he suspected that she might have been in an accident, or had encountered some kind of emergency. He began contacting local hospitals, but there were no reports of injuries matching her description. Feeling the urgency of the situation, he then contacted Sherry's parents, who lived about 120 kilometers away. They also had no idea where she was. Therefore, they decided to notify the police and report Sherry missing. The officers went to the couple's home to conduct a routine investigation and quickly realized that something was wrong. They decided to interview the neighbors, but no one had seen Sherry since she had dropped her children off at school that morning. Sherry usually went to the store around 10 a.m. to do her shopping and then returned home to do her chores. However, on May 6th, this routine was interrupted. She did not return by noon. Concerns prompted them to check the route Sherry would typically take, which led the police to the parking lot where she usually parked. There, they discovered her truck, apparently abandoned in a hurry. With the keys still in the ignition, Sherry's identification was found attached to her keychain, and the Mother's Day gifts she had purchased were scattered across the floor of the car. The doors were unlocked, and there was no sign of Sherry inside. The police later attempted to contact Michael, but he was not home, which they found unusual given the circumstances. Sherry was missing. Yet Michael did not seem anxious to hear from her. Furthermore, they learned that Michael had begun selling items that belonged to Sherry, suggesting that he was not expecting her to return. The police reviewed security footage from both the outdoor parking lot and inside the store. The recordings confirmed that Sherry had gone shopping that morning. Consistent with her usual routine, there was no indication that she was in distress. She was not followed around the store, and no suspicious individuals were seen in the footage. It was evident that something went wrong after she loaded her groceries into her truck. Unfortunately, security cameras did not capture any footage of the parking lot after she approached her car at 9:22 a.m. as the officers discussed the events in the parking lot. A passerby overheard their conversation and approached them. She reported that she had seen a turquoise sedan pull up near Sherry's car earlier that morning. A blonde woman wearing a brown suit and sunglasses exited the vehicle after a brief conversation with this woman. The witness saw Sherry being handcuffed and taken away in an unknown direction. The woman who arrested her did not appear to be a police officer, and the vehicle's appearance was unusual. It is difficult to determine the circumstances of her encounter with an apparent plainclothes officer. Police quickly became concerned, noting that it was unusual for police to operate in the city without a marked vehicle or uniform while making an arrest. The entire situation raised alarm bells. One officer, who happened to have attended high school with Sherry, stated that he knew both Sherry and her husband Michael well, and asserted that Sherry did not seem like the type of person who would be so serious as to be handcuffed and taken away, especially since the young couple had no prior legal issues. The witness provided a valuable clue. The police quickly searched the databases of all police stations, hoping to find relevant information regarding Sherry's case. However, they found no such records, indicating that this was not an arrest but a kidnapping. The police initially focused their attention on Michael, but then he provided a credible alibi at the time of the kidnapping. He was working at a grocery store, and several employees confirmed that he was on duty. In addition, security footage was reviewed to further verify his whereabouts. During the initial stages of the interrogation, Michael revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Diana. Surprisingly, he mentioned that he did not know her last name. Michael also did not know her address, but the police were able to obtain a phone number associated with Diana at that time, when cell phones were not yet common. Michael provided his home phone number as a result. He was released after investigating the address associated with the phone number. The police discovered that Diana's full name was Diana Hahn. The address was verified in their database, prompting the police to plan a visit to her home. The police arrived at the house and knocked on the door. although they heard noises from inside. No one answered at first. After a while of waiting, Michael opened the door. Standing behind him was Diana. Michael's attitude aroused suspicion. He appeared indifferent to his wife's disappearance and seemed more concerned about his mistress. The police decided to take both of them to the station for questioning. As they suspected that the situation might be related to a love triangle, it is believed that Sherry may have discovered Michael's affair, which could have led to conflict, either between the couple or involving Diana. Diana had become an integral part of Michael's life. He brought his sons to her home on numerous occasions, allowing them to spend time together as a family. Witnesses stated that Sherry had known about the situation long before her disappearance and had frequent conflicts with both Michael and Diana. Many witnesses confirmed the hostility between Diana and Sherry. Despite this tension, Michael appeared indifferent, which exacerbated the rivalry between the two women. Sherry viewed Diana as a homewrecker and was determined to protect her marriage. She steadfastly refused to consider divorce, believing that their problems were merely a temporary crisis that would eventually resolve itself. Through discussions with Diana and Michael, as well as their relatives, it became clear that Sherry's family had been facing significant challenges for a long time. Observations of Michael's behavior indicated that he treated Sherry more like a servant than a partner. She would wake up at 2 a.m. to prepare meals for him, and even prepared hot water for him, ensuring he could enjoy a hot bath when he woke up. Sherry complied with many of his requests, but Michael constantly found reasons to criticize her. Sherry's family members knew that Michael was unhappy with Sherry's appearance after giving birth. She dedicated a lot of time and effort to getting back in shape, dieting, exercising, and experimenting with her hairstyles and makeup, all in an attempt to please him. Unfortunately, her efforts never seemed to be enough. As he often insulted her and blamed her, the family dynamic worsened when Michael was transferred to a store in Santa Barbara. His new work schedule, which included night shifts and daytime sleep, added to their stress. After a while, Michael was transferred back, where he met his lover, Diana. They discovered that they had a lot in common, leading to the rapid development of their romantic relationship. Both of their mothers were from Japan, and their fathers had served in the United States Army. Their colleagues knew about the relationship and generally had a negative view of Diana. Her mysterious nature and stern demeanor scared many people. In the months before Sherry's disappearance, Michael often told his wife about a friend named Alex. He said that Alex was struggling after a breakup and that he was being supportive, including visiting Alex overnight. However, the frequent calls to their home were not from Alex, but from Diana, who disguised her voice to sound like a man. It was clear that Michael made no effort to hide his relationship. In fact, he seemed to flaunt it, which easily hurt Sherry and made her worry about his feelings for her. A neighbor recalled that last Christmas, Sherry came to his house in tears. She was alone, knowing that Michael had taken their sons to spend the holidays with Diana, feeling betrayed. Sherry sought comfort from her neighbor. Despite her pain, she had not yet considered divorce. She still hoped to save their relationship and believed she could work things out. However, as her mother later recounted, Sherry had decided to leave Michael and take the children before she went missing. She had no intention of seeking child support, believing she could handle her challenges on her own. The interrogation of Michael and Diana ended with a crucial question. Where was Diana the day Sherry went missing? She claimed to have taken the day off work to go for a long bike ride outside the city. However, her alibi appeared to be weak, as there was no testimony or video evidence to corroborate her story. A call to the police station from a co-worker at Michael's grocery store raised further concerns. The co-worker noted that Diana was an hour late for her shift the day after Sherry went missing. During questioning, Diana had several scratches on her forehead, and her hair almost covered her face. when asked to push her hair aside. It became clear that she was hiding several scratches, which she claimed were from a bicycle accident, however. These looked more like fingernail scratches than the usual injuries from a fall. When the police asked to see her palms, elbows, and knees, areas that are often injured in bicycle accidents, Diana's skin showed no scratches, suggesting that her claim of having fallen off a bicycle was a lie. Despite these contradictions, she stuck to her story. Michael's behavior was equally disturbing. He showed no concern about his wife's disappearance. He did not participate in search efforts and did not attempt to join any groups. He explained that he needed to care for their children during this difficult time. However, this excuse did not seem sincere, especially when he tried to spend time with his mistress, Diana. While leaving the children with his parents, the police are working to gather evidence to charge the suspects previously. A witness mentioned that the undercover cop was driving a turquoise car, but she could not remember the license plate number. The police believe that the perpetrators were unlikely to have used their own vehicles and suspect that the car the perpetrator was driving was rented. Therefore, they decided to check local car rental companies. Their investigation revealed that a turquoise Nissan Altima had indeed been rented on the day of Sherry's incident. The police aimed to impound the car for inspection, but it was at a car wash, although the rental company did not require a thorough cleaning of the interior after each return. The Nissan was in worse condition than usual. Employees reported that the interior was in disarray. The back seat was stained, and the side mirrors were torn. At the direction of management, the car was sent for cleaning. After the car was returned, the police inspected the interior. Surprisingly, much of the evidence remained intact, despite the cleaning. When they lifted the rear carpet, they discovered a large stain underneath that looked like dried blood. Consequently, the decision was made to seize the car for forensic examination. During the inspection, bloodstains were found in the trunk and on the seats when they cut the upholstery. The foam material of the rear seats was soaked with evidence, and the bloodstains in the car were sent for analysis. The results later confirmed that the blood belonged to Sherry. Additionally, it was determined that Diana was the person who rented the car. Therefore, the police decided to interrogate Diana again. During this interview, Diana maintained her innocence, sticking to her previously fabricated story during the search. The police found a handbag belonging to Diana, which contained a remarkable photograph. This photo was a professional studio picture of Sherry's family, capturing a family gathering with their children. However, two important details stood out. Diana appeared in the photo next to Sherry. As the police unraveled the complexities of the family's relationships, they began to uncover Diana's many intrigues. In Diana's handbag, a piece of paper was found with Sherry's name and her bank account number. Further investigation revealed that Diana had studied and practiced witchcraft. Diana had confided to a colleague about her intention to sacrifice someone on Michael's birthday, which raised significant concerns. Michael's birthday was only a few days after Sherry's murder, making these developments even more suspicious. In this context, Diana expressed a desire to speak to Michael. In response, the police organized a discreet meeting. They agreed to let Michael into the interrogation room. Their conversation was being recorded, and they did not seem to know it. They spoke in a very relaxed manner. The police could clearly hear their discussion, which provided valuable insights into the case. Diana expressed her frustration with Michael, accusing him of putting her in a dangerous situation that could have led to her arrest. She repeatedly questioned him about why he had placed her in these circumstances. The couple was clearly looking for a way out of this complicated situation and was trying to find a means to avoid punishment. Michael then made vague statements and urged Diana to tell the truth to the police, stressing that she had nothing to worry about. They attempted to stage a misleading conversation to distract the police. They had no idea that important information had reached police. Michael was then escorted out of the interrogation room, and the discussion continued with Diana, who was pressed to explain her possession of a piece of paper with the bank account number. In her defense, Diana claimed that Sherry had abandoned the children and that the account was necessary to purchase necessities for them. However, her explanation lacked credibility. The police believed that Diana was lying. After investigations, they learned that Sherry was a good woman. Many of her acquaintances described her as a loving mother to her children, and there was no sign of her mistreating them. It was clear that she was trusted to look after the children of her neighbors and other households, which reinforced the belief that she would not abandon her own children. Despite this, Diana continued to try to portray Sherry in a negative light. The police realized that Diana was involved in Sherry's case, but they felt they did not have enough evidence to arrest her or file charges. Therefore, they allowed her to go home while the investigation continued. The case was widely reported in the media, raising concerns that journalists could play a key role in assisting criminal investigations or obstructing the pursuit of justice. Sherry's disappearance was a popular topic on all news platforms, including newspapers, radio, and television. Her photos were displayed prominently throughout the city, prompting widespread public discussion. The police received numerous calls with tips related to the case. However, many of them were unfounded. Despite this, they focused on identifying credible leads based on the evidence they had. The police decided to share information with the public about a possible connection to someone named Diana as soon as her photo was aired. Calls to the station increased significantly. One notable tip came from a woman working at a local wig shop who recalled that Diana had purchased a chestnut wig a few weeks earlier. Diana made it clear that she intended to look like a police officer to intimidate someone. Further investigation revealed that she had paid for the wig with a check made out to Sherry. Signed in distinctive blue ink, a salesperson from another store contacted the police to report that Diana had visited his establishment around the same time. During this visit, Diana purchased handcuffs and a police badge, which she paid for with a personal check. Additionally, a hardware store employee provided a third report, stating that approximately a week before Sherry was abducted, Diana had also visited the store and purchased an axe. She drew attention with her striking makeup, which was particularly bold and set her apart from the others. Although the guest wished to remain anonymous, she paid with a check in her own name, establishing a direct link to the potential crime. The police collected physical evidence and later discovered an axe at Diana's residence, which was sent for forensic testing. Surprisingly, tests found no trace of Diana's blood. Suggesting the axe was not used in the murder, the police determined that Diana had carefully planned Sherry's abduction the day before. She had purchased a brown suit, shoes, superglue, large garbage bags, toiletries, lighter fluid, matches, sunglasses, and other items that could have been instrumental in the abduction. As a result, the police were able to piece together a possible timeline of the events surrounding the abduction. Sherry may not have recognized Diana when she wore the wig and glasses, which could explain why she did not resist during the arrest. However, when they were close together and Sherry got into the rental car, it was clear that she recognized Diana sitting in the back seat. Sherry attempted to escape by screaming and doing her best to block Diana from driving away. During her resistance, Sherry scratched Diana's forehead based on the blood found in the car. It is possible that Sherry was killed shortly afterward in the back seat. Diana was eventually arrested, and it was discovered that she was in possession of a pen containing the same blue ink that was involved in the case. Attention then turned to Michael. As he seemed to have been aware of his mistress Diana's plans, given his suspicious behavior at a press conference. There were indications that he might have been the instigator of the crime. The police suggested that Sherry's husband, Michael, be investigated for possible involvement in the murder. Following this revelation, the police department received numerous calls from drug dealers and people in the escort service industry, all reporting that Michael regularly used drugs and hired escorts. One escort revealed that on the day Sherry went missing, she had met Michael, who had taken her out of town. This information attracted the attention of the police as the investigation progressed. On June 1, 1996, near Kaduna Larga Road, on the edge of a cliff, police discovered women's shoes and sunglasses belonging to Diana. Shortly thereafter, they found the body of a woman. Dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sherry, who had gone missing. Forensic examinations revealed that Sherry had been stabbed about a dozen times, mostly in the neck and upper chest. A forensic expert determined that a serrated knife was the murder weapon, with multiple stab wounds to Sherry's body indicating a violent and deliberate attack, particularly to the face. This evidence suggested a personal grudge against Sherry after the murder. Sherry's body was dumped outside the city. Worryingly, Michael had been socializing with an escort just meters from where Sherry's body was found. Suggesting his possible involvement in the crime, the police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael. Further investigations revealed that Diana had lured Sherry into her car before killing her. Notably, hair from Diana's wig was found on Sherry, and the wig was later recovered. Diana's trial was initially held. With her facing charges of kidnapping and murder, the attorney took a fairly passive approach to defending his client, focusing primarily on minimizing the severity of the sentence by arguing that the murder was not intentional. However, the evidence presented clearly demonstrated that Diana had meticulously planned the attack. After brief deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Diana Hahn was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Diana testified against Michael, claiming that he had urged her to kill Sherry. However, Diana's testimony was not the most crucial factor in the prosecution's success. Just before the hearing began, another woman came forward to the police, revealing that she had been in a relationship with Michael shortly before the murder. She stated that he had also urged her to kill his wife, Sherry. According to her account, Michael not only sought to kill his wife, but also requested that it be done in the cruelest way possible. Wishing for Sherry to suffer for a long time before dying, this woman considered his request a joke and refused to comply. The woman then decided to end her relationship with Michael, who was behaving in a troubled manner. After discovering the tragic events that had occurred, she contacted the police. The prosecution presented evidence that Michael's motive for the murder was a desire to avoid a prolonged divorce and custody battle, as well as to secure the financial benefit of Sherry's life insurance policy, from which he had received $50. Meanwhile, Michael's attorney presented a defense, largely arguing that Michael was a victim of circumstances due to Sherry's refusal to file for divorce. Ultimately, Michael Daly was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After Sherry's death, custody of her children was awarded to their grandparents.